go beyond the perception of our two eyes, then we're getting into the next level of how it is that the individual is able to relate to these other realms and these other dimensions or frequencies of electromagnetic vibration. Now, what's interesting about that is that when you get to a certain level of development spiritually and you get to be able to perceive these other realms and dimensions, then things like, say, remote viewing or bilocation, astral projection, these things actually kind of unfold as a matter of course. And we all have these spiritual capabilities. And this is what a lot of these ancient, rishis and prophets, these ancient shamans and ancient sages and stuff, were able to practice and able to understand, and they tried to bring this understanding to their people. And a lot of the time, that's where a lot of these religions come from, is these ancient, highly developed beings that understood the nature of reality began to disseminate this information to people that were kind of lost in the weeds and couldn't see the forest for the trees. If you want to look into the Vimanas in the Vedas, that's the ancient Hindu text, they talk about things like these bell-shaped craft that had the ability to zip around the sky, basically anti-gravity vehicles. And they used gyroscopes and liquid mercury within their craft to create these like anti-gravity fields around these craft that allowed them to basically be like floating hotels, you guys. Like, we're talking like big buildings that had multiple different layers and levels. And what's really interesting about it is they actually have schematics for these things. And we're going to get into how those schematics played a role in the Nazis and stuff like that a little bit later. But what's also interesting is things like the Mayans and the Toltecs and their ancient tablets and stones that they carved on and stuff. They actually have pictures of things like what we would call UFOs or saucers. And, there's obviously petroglyphs all over the world of these interdimensional beings that are carved into stone or on cave paintings and stuff like that. This is where we get into things like, the Greys or, things like the Mothman, Bigfoot, like these things that are considered fringe. But if you're living out in nature, then these are phenomena that you actually experience. The Native Americans talk about the Kachinas and stuff like that. There's also obviously the other side of the Native American lore regarding the darker side. That would be things like skinwalkers, things of that nature. All of this stuff plays into the spirit world and understanding the spirit world, understanding things like the use of the electromagnetic field or the consciousness field, its ability to bilocate and stuff like that. Now, I'm sure lots of people have seen some of the pictures of the UFO flyover, the fight that was over Germany. I think it was in the 1600s. And this was actually documented. It was put into the German newspaper and blew everybody's mind. There was some incredible things like orbs and stuff. There was this massive, what looked like a tear in the fabric of reality. It looked like a giant arrow, a black arrow. Like, all this stuff was documented. It was placed in the newspaper. So we've been interacting with these other dimensions and seeing these UAPs for quite some time. Now, what a lot of people don't know is there was actually UFO flyovers here in the United States of America in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And these things looked like floating ships. They looked like floating like wooden vessels of sorts with like wings and stuff on them. And a lot of people, there's even reports in like Texas and stuff where these things were downed, these crafts went down, and then people interacted with the human beings that were flying them and actually helped them repair their ship and get back in the air. And these things were going from like California all the way over to Ohio. And so this is kind of the roots of this ancient, this modern secret space program, as it's been called. Now, when we get into things like the Nazis and the Foo Fighters, which, the flight MH370, is that right? It's MH370, Ash?
Yeah, you got it, man. You're on fire right now. Keep going.
So when we look at the flight MH370 and we see these little orbs circling around the airplane, those, in my opinion, are reminiscent of the Foo Fighters from World War II, which were these like basketball-sized luminescent objects that were, whenever our planes, Allied planes were over Germany or over Europe, these things would fly up and go around and float above the engines of the airplanes, and then they would just short circuit them and the airplanes would go down. They didn't even have to fire a shot. And so these are the kinds of tech that the Nazis had access to. And then there's there's also things like, and this is where we get into the whole Vimanas and the Vedas. The Nazis went to India. The Nazis were very interested in the occult. They were very interested in ancient technology and stuff like that. Hence why, the Raiders of the Lost Ark and stuff like that, the search for the Holy Grail and things of that nature, Indiana Jones. Why the Nazis were in those stories was because they were very prevalent in looking for this ancient tech and these ancient occultic powers. So when they went to India and they talked to the Indians about the Vimanas, they actually had schematics for how to build these things. And it's based on gyroscopes, which, if you're not familiar with gyroscopes, is basically spinning wheels within spinning wheels that create centripetal force that almost is like an anti-gravity type field that surrounds the gyroscope. And what the ancient Indians found was that if they filled these gyroscopic wheels with liquid mercury, it would amplify that frequency or amplify that electromagnetic field and surround a craft, surround the Vimana. So the Nazis basically took these schematics and then they started creating vehicles. And this is where we get into like the whole notion of the Nazi flying saucers, how they're able to defy gravity and stuff like that, which you can look into Operation Highjump, when Admiral Byrd and the United States Navy went down to Antarctica and Argentina to try to take the deep underground military base that the Nazis had built in both of those locations from them. And then supposedly these flying craft, these flying saucers, came out of the hole in the ice and started to shoot down our aircraft, our airplanes. And they apparently even sawed one of our small boy ships in half with the blink of an eye. Admiral Byrd, realizing that he was outgunned, basically hightailed it back to DC and told them everything about it. And then if you look into, there's a UFO flyover of DC on July 12th, 1952. And these UFOs, these UAPs, were flying in military formation over the United States Capitol. Much of this isn't really talked about in the Mockingbird media, of course. So we can also talk about things briefly and how they relate to modern times. Things like the underground civilizations that are all over the planet. If you look into ancient lore and legends and stuff like that, for example, the Hopi and the Native American legends here in Arizona about living underground and basically being slaves to giants and coming into this world near the Grand Canyon, which there's apparently an underground citadel in the Grand Canyon. If you look into Kincaid and how he was exploring the Grand Canyon on a boat going on the Colorado River for the Smithsonian, and how he found this underground world that actually had a lot of ancient Egyptian artifacts and stuff like that. That's one example. Another example is the ancient underground city in Turkey. I believe it's called Derinkuyu. And how that city could house literally 20,000 people. And then we also can look into the work of Graham Hancock and how there's all these ancient sites all over the world that predate any sort of modern dating that is being given by modern archaeology. How there's literally all over the world, there's these flooded ruins under hundreds of feet of water. There's it's a massive building. It's a massive structure off the coast of Japan. It's absolutely enormous and was obviously at one time above water. There's also the ancient city that is off of the coast of India. The name escapes me at the moment. I don't know. But there's all these different examples of ancient civilizations prior to the flood that were highly advanced. There's lots of people that speculate that the ancient Egyptian pyramids are not 5,000 years old. They were not created with slave labor. I mean, we can't even replicate these things to this day, let alone the mathematical precision that it would take to create something like the Great Pyramid, or not just one, but three of them is incredible. There's also the ancient pyramids in China that dwarf the pyramids in Giza. There's a pyramid in Bosnia that dwarfs the pyramid in Giza. There's all sorts of examples of this. There's underwater civilizations that were submerged after the flood off of the coast of most of the Polynesian islands. So there's all these examples of underground civilizations or civilizations that have been submerged in water all over the world. But this parallels modern deep underground military bases here in our world now. because believe it or not, there's literally hundreds, if not thousands of these things all over the world. There's hundreds here in the United States of America. And these DUMBs were created through things like nuclear tunnel boring machines, or just tunnel boring machines in general. They started out with tunnel boring machines where they had to basically excavate all the dirt and rock and pull it out of the hole and, sift it to the side. And then they created nuclear tunnel boring machines, which are basically tunnel boring machines that are like 40 feet in diameter. These things are absolutely enormous, and they basically carve through the rock. And because it's got a nuclear reactor in it that heats the head of the drill, this massive drill, to like 10,000 degrees, what happens is there's no need to pull out all the dirt and mud and all that stuff as they're moving through the earth, as they're moving through the rock, because what happens is that the head of the drill actually melts the stone and creates a vitrified stone tunnel, a vitrified glass tunnel, as this thing moves through the earth at 7 miles per day. So most of these deep underground military bases can actually be easily created, and we are talking about whole installations, almost like whole cities that are underneath the earth, in the bedrock of the planet, in which a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about, like the classified tech and stuff like that, that's where this research is done. Now, that being said, the DUMBs, deep underground military bases, or just deep underground bases, a lot of the time, it isn't all just military. Yes, we have things like Air Force and Navy, which the Navy also have like underwater facilities that are drilled into islands and stuff like that. But you also have Army, you have Air Force, you have Navy, you have now Space Force. You have all these different branches of the military, and you also have things like the NSA, things like the CIA, etc. And all of these different agencies have their own different DUMBs. Like, for example, NORAD is a military facility, and then there's like a deep underground base for for NASA, where they house all of their servers, thousands upon thousands of servers to maintain supremacy over the internet. And then there's things like S4, or what people call Area 51, that largely is a CIA operation. Now, all of these DUMBs are what are called compartmentalized. And compartmentalization is basically like a silo of information that is controlled and tightly knit, that most of these DUMBs are not communicating with each other regarding the research and development that's being done within them. And that means that basically, for those that aren't familiar with compartmentalization, it's basically you have a whole puzzle, right? But very few people are going to see that whole puzzle. What you do is you give each individual doing research, you give each of them a different small piece of the puzzle, and then they work on that small piece of the puzzle, and then a person above them has access to a couple of these pieces of these puzzles and how it is that these puzzle pieces fit together. And then there's somebody above them that has even more of these puzzle pieces fit together, and they have a much larger compartmentalized view of what's going on. So each of these intellectual research silos are all across the country in these hundreds of DUMBs that are all over the nation. And each of them is based on a different aspect of what we are calling the deep state, these intelligence agencies, or the military, or R&D and corporations, things like Lockheed Martin and stuff like that, Skunk Works. And each of them is kind of allied with different corporations for different things. Each of these compartmentalized areas are based on different research and development. And in order for this research and development to be done, a lot of most, if not all of the individuals, whether they be military or, corporate contractors, independent contractors, whether it be, intelligence assets, they're all signing non-disclosure agreements. They're all signing agreements on contracts that basically say if they disclose any of these things, then they'll be locked in prison for 20 years for treason. All of their assets will be seized, and their families, it's not in the contract, but they know their families' lives are over. So there's a lot of fear that goes into coming out about these technologies that could have massive ramifications in our economy. And not just our economy, but social systems, etc. So these NDAs are a lot of the time also attached to things like security clearances. And these security clearances and NDAs go hand in hand, and all depending on how much you're read into this compartmentalized aspect of the government was going to dictate the level of your security clearance. Now, there's people like Bill Cooper that talk about things like the Q level security clearance, which is like the highest level of security clearance. But as far as on the books, you have classified, you have you have secret, then you have top secret, and that's kind of how, as far as on the books go, that's how things are kind of arranged.
Hey Jake, can I
Now,
jump in and ask you some questions on some of
absolutely.
that? Because yeah, you're really cooking. I appreciate it, man. On the compartmentalization aspect, like that's the part where I'm really interested on, because it seems like from what my own understanding of UFOlogy, et cetera, is that like the government, tried to reverse engineer this stuff, but they found it was more beneficial to move it to third parties, where then these third party contractors can reverse engineer it, where they're not bound by FOIA requests. And I was just curious of what your thoughts might be around that. I totally agree with your thought process on the compartmentalization as well, right? Like part of the reason why it's not efficient in the government side is that if you only see one perspective of it and not the whole view, it's not very efficient, right? But if you have too many people see the whole view, then it's really easy for that information to leak out. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. What are your thoughts?
Well, you're absolutely right, and that's why they do NDAs and security clearances that are so, like, pigeonholing people into keeping their mouth shut. I mean, if you think about, for example, the atomic bomb, we had 10,000 people working on that,
Thanks
and
for
nobody
the
knew a damn thing
donation.
until the
Appreciate it.
bombs were dropped. And this is how tightly knit and highly efficient these special access programs are. So, and that was something else I was going to get into. But to answer your question, yes, they hire corporations to do this research and development, because then it's in the private sector. It's not government. And so now the private sector is able to do all these things with government money, with our tax dollars, but it's nothing that is privy to the public. They can say, well, this is our research and development. We're a private corporation. We're not beholden to the people the way that the government is. So technically, FOIA will do you no good. And this is where we get into things like special access programs. And there are different aspects of special access programs. I'm not going to quite delineate it here, but each of these special access programs is based on different research and development. So different corporations are going to say, for example, like one corporation that's really advanced in, say, biology is not going to do the same research and development that some corporation that's really advanced in technology is going to do, or chemical manufacturing is going to do, or psychological research and stuff like that. So each of these different corporations has their own little niche that they're really good at, and then they're contracted with the government to do this stuff in a special access program that most of the time is off the books. Now, does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, no, I think that was really great. I think too that just a few other comments. I'm just going to throw on some of the stuff you said. We don't have to go all the way back, but in one of the interviews I was doing with Salvatore Pais, he actually mentioned the Djinn, in terms of potentially being some, like having that same ancient history interactions. The pyramids, I think, are obviously really interesting. The Grand Canyon Kincaid thing, that was something I just became aware of, which I thought was wild. When you mentioned under the old civilizations in Turkey, Göbekli Tepe, I think is something that's pushing back history as well. And then I forget if I just mentioned this, but with the DUMBs, I wonder whether or not Diego Garcia military base in the Indian Ocean is underground facilities. So a lot of stuff that you've been saying, I think, has been consistent with stuff that I've been researching and stuff we've been looking into with MH370x. So thanks a lot, man.
Absolutely. And yes, it's anybody that really looks into this stuff. I mean, if you want to learn about DUMBs, just look into Project Camelot, where they were basically creating all these DUMBs all over the country. Now, the thing is about DUMBs, you guys, is that it's not all nefarious. It actually makes sense. You don't want the enemy to know where it is that your military installations are.
Interesting.
You don't want them to know where your bases are at. So you're going to, of course, build underground, and then it's all covert. Then it's all underneath the surface, quite literally. And that means that your military targets are not really targets anymore, because it's just vast amounts of wilderness. And yes, these things are all over the world. And this is part of the reason why, whether it be the Indian Ocean or, in some places in Asia, I mean, because that China has these, deep underground bases as well. But Ukraine right now, dude, Ukraine was a part of the Soviet Union. So the Soviet Union created a bunch of DUMBs all over Ukraine. And it is that infrastructure that is an asset to anyone and everyone that occupies that area, because the infrastructure for the military industrial complex has already been built by a previous government. And this is where I think we get into things like the bioweapons labs in Ukraine and stuff like that, because this is where this compartmentalized research is being done.
We're learning some real
So
deep info right now.
there's things like when it comes to special access programs that it's really important to understand, because a lot of this stuff, the government needs a way of funneling the money to these things without actually giving any sort of a paper trail as to where the
Whatever.
money is going. So a lot of the time what will happen is they'll have
Spelt it wrong.
like a program that they have like an umbrella over, and that umbrella program has a bunch of other smaller programs that are like these special access programs. And so then the government will fund the money for this one big program, but then what's off the books is all of the smaller programs that are a part of this much larger program that are all these smaller special access programs. So this is kind of where we get into things like, the Pentagon ordering a $10,000 hammer, or the Congress having a
Hey,
$2
Space
million
Tofu,
bathroom,
everybody.
or the $2.3 trillion that went missing from the defense budget in the Pentagon before 9/11. And this is also what also bleeds into this is the black budget. And the black budget is basically the use of covert operations to procure billions of dollars that is off the books. This is where we get into the CIA, bringing tons of cocaine into the country,
This dude knows a
the
lot.
trafficking of firearms, and yes, the trafficking of human beings, the modern day slave trade, and how those billions of dollars are then siphoned into this black budget, and then it's redistributed along with these government funds and the moving of money to these special access programs. It's a way of bolstering these things as well. And they also use these black budgets to, say, fund revolutions in foreign nations so they can have access to the resources there, and then start doing things like building deep underground bases in these foreign countries that allow them to be a part of this much larger military industrial
Yeah,
complex
$500 for a hammer.
infrastructure that is literally a breakaway civilization under our feet. Any thoughts, Ash?
Yeah, so I think the black budget thing is super important, right? Because even if there's people out there, especially members of Congress, who can't believe that some of the stuff we're talking about is real, right? That they can believe that this money's being misappropriated, right? So, in order for any of this stuff to go down, there's reverse engineering that happen, even just stuff with the third-party contractors. This is where we talk about the $500 for a hammer, $10,000 for a toilet seat. The fact the Pentagon can't pass an audit. Tim Burchett mentions this all the time. This is an angle where we can reach people that, even if they can't believe in some of the lore of UFOlogy, we can say at least they can believe that, okay, the facts are that Pentagon is misappropriating money, right? And if we dig into that, I have a strong belief and understanding that these reverse engineering programs will be revealed. So to me, that's a good avenue of attack for people that want to achieve the truth, is that we go after the money, right?
Right. You got to follow the paper trail. Now that we've kind of laid all that groundwork, let's talk about some of the, research and development that has gone on in some of these dumps. So our money, the tax dollars and the black budget, are funding things like researching things like Element 115, which Bob Lazar spoke about. I believe it was in like the late 80s, early 90s, and how he was a part of Area 51 or S4, a sub-portion of Area 51, and how they were researching this element called Element 115 that supposedly, he said, was coding this craft that was not engineered by anything that we had. And there's a lot of speculation that it was a craft from some sort of ancient or far more evolved civilization that had this technology, and this craft was coded in Element 115. They tried doing everything they could to shattering this Element 115 shell around the craft, and they couldn't figure anything out until what they did is they dipped the whole thing in liquid nitrogen, and then they smashed it with a hydraulic hammer, and then they shattered this Element 115 coating or shell around the craft. Then they began to be able to study it and figure out what it was. And what they came to find was everything in the world, when it's bombarded with electrons, any metal, any person, anything, rocks, when they're bombarded with electrons, the electrons begin to disintegrate the molecular structure of whatever object is being bombarded. But Element 115, these electrons, and it could absorb them and absorb them and absorb them. And as it did, it tried to convert itself to Element 116. But it was never able to be bombarded with so much electrons that it would end up converting to Element 116. So it's almost like it was a sponge for electrons.
Know all this about Element 115.
And it was basically making
Called it
the
vibranium.
skin, the element 115, impenetrable and indestructible to a bombardment from electrons, which if you're moving at really, really high speeds, then you're going to be bombarded with more and more electrons the faster you go. So the element 115 is kind of like a sponge that, for electrons around these craft that allow it to be bombarded as it's going at really high speeds, and not only not disintegrate but get stronger and stronger and stronger as it tries to convert to element 116. And then once it no longer is able to, once it's done flying or whatever, once the electrons are no longer bombarding it, then it basically almost like dries out and it converts back to element 115. And so that's the kind of stuff that they're researching in these dumps. There's also other things like, they're researching things like nanometals and how it is that they can layer these nanometals in like a zero gravity environment and basically stack these metals on top of one another in a way that creates new elements and things of that nature. Have you heard anything about that, Ash?
Yeah, so actually, I'm glad you asked me about that. I think your stuff you mentioned about element 115, I did not know all the deep background on that, which is very interesting. One thing that I have kind of come to understand from talking to engineers and physicists is that we might not even need element 115 in order to power some of these gravity engines that are out there. We might be able to induce room temperature superconductivity with normal metals using electric currents, using the right types of shapes, which I thought was really interesting. And then the metamaterials discussion is really interesting because from what I understand, it's a bismuth, zinc, magnesium composite, where the various metals, and I'm not an alchemist or super deep into chemical or engineering in general, but that one of them acts as like an insulator. And so what you can do here then is you can have a certain effect on the outside of the craft. And then I think it's the bismuth that's the one that is kind of like what makes the magic happen. So that you can create this quantum, macroscopic quantum coherence effect, where now you can achieve these properties of being able to travel at superluminal speeds, faster than the speed of light, while still having mass reduction for the people who are inside the craft so that they don't get essentially melted out there. And this has been all throughout UFOlogy. We've seen these metamaterials, and people have found these metamaterials that claim to be from UFOs that have these properties. So this is, if you're interested in UFOs, I would remember these three elements: magnesium, bismuth, zinc.
Very interesting. I did not know that. Yeah. Thank you. Magnesium, bismuth, and zinc. And now the combination of these things, is it done on like a nanoscale, or are these things combined together to create a new element? Do you know anything about that? Is it because of the property, the electron spin resonance of these metals as they're layered on top of one another, that shields individuals inside the craft from the G-force?
I think that's the layman's terms for it. Yeah. So these are metamaterials. A metamaterial is anything where at the atomic level we can layer things like one atom at a time of the various different elements, and that it will create a new, essentially something that has new properties that are not necessarily beholden to the individual elements that form it. Another one that we've heard recently is this LK99. So an example there is you're taking copper and you're taking lead. Neither of these are magnetic. But if you combine them and cook them with the right recipe, now you get this extremely powerful diamagnetic property, which may even lead to room temperature superconductivity. In other aspects, people have seen where you can create invisibility shields, where the idea is that you can have the light actually just bend entirely around like a blanket, essentially, of a material that's a metamaterial, so that the light passes through and bends around the person that's behind it. So these are all examples of metamaterials, and metamaterials have the capability of changing really everything about how we understand elements out there, because they can create new properties that we don't exist from the individual elements themselves. And this is where material science comes into play, right? And so the example I like to use here is if you were to give your phone to a caveman, right, they could use the phone until the battery runs out. Once the battery runs out, they'll never be able to charge it again. They can never reproduce the phone, even if you give them, a long period of time, because they don't have the material science required to make the microchips, even the plastic case, etc. It's the same kind of concept for us when we're talking about something that could potentially be like a UFO, is that we don't have the material science to be able to layer these things at that atomic scale right now. But in the future we might, or maybe we have, and now we're starting to see them out there,
Well, yeah, and I think that's the kind of stuff that's going on in the dumps. So, like you were talking about room temperature superconductors, the coupling of a room temperature superconductor with a 0 point energy engine, which is basically the extraction of energy from the quantum foam that is at the very fabric of reality itself, because everything's made up of energy. Energy is essentially infinite. And if we can figure out a way to extract energy from that place, that 0 point space, then we can basically have infinite energy, clean energy. And so if you have infinite energy moving through an engine, you're going to need something that's going to cool the engine down. And that's where we get into the room temperature superconductor. And if you look into the patents that was filed by Salvador Payas and declassified by Donald Trump in 2020, then you'll see that these patents are very real, that there is such a thing as a room temperature superconductor. There is such a thing as a 0 point energy engine. And yes, there is such a thing as a TR3B. It's a anti-gravity or inertia propulsion craft that actually is it's triangular shaped, and when you combine all three of these things together, what you get is a craft that has an infinite energy source, and from that infinite energy source, and that's also cooled by the room temperature superconductor, you have enough energy that allows the TR3B to function at really high levels of energy consumption without the need for things like normal rocket fuel and stuff like that. And with the technology that's capable, the TR3B is capable of using, which without going into too much, it's basically
Robert, thanks a lot, man.
what looks like
we've been going through the history of
arrows
ufology
that are all like pointing, at the same location, up, down, and left to right, all pointing at the same centralized location. And when large amounts of energy are channeled through those nodes, it creates a really small, minor, or minute anti-gravity field on like a quantum or a molecular level. But if you end up lining the TR3B with all these little diodes that have this capability, and then you shield that apparatus with something like a chamber that houses argon gas, due to the electron spin resonance of the argon gas, when the energy is channeled through all those little diodes, and it creates all these small little electromagnetic field, these little anti-gravity fields, that frequency or that field ends up affecting the argon gas in a way to where it amplifies those little bubbles of anti-gravity to the point to where it surrounds the craft. Is that similar to what it is that you've researched, Ash?
Yeah, and I'll add on, man, you really hit the nail on the head there. So I would suggest everybody take a read of High Frequency Gravitational Waves Induced Propulsion by Salvatore Payas. I'm just going to read some of the excerpts that I took from it. It may be possible to generate high power, high frequency gravitational waves, HFGWs, by high frequency accelerated axial rotation spin and or accelerated high frequency vibration in electrically charged, possibly asymmetric structure. High-frequency gravitational waves are generated by enabling the Gershenstein effect, that is the gravitational wave production of propagating electromagnetic radiation through strong magnetic fields. Controlled motion of charged matter under rapid acceleration transients may enable macroscopic quantum coherence, namely possible quantum mechanical behavior of macroscopic objects. If multiple high-power, high-frequency gravitational waves were to be focused on a particular point in space-time locality, it can induce a space-time curvature singularity, namely a highly distorted and disrupted patch of space-time fabric. From a propulsion perspective, a craft enabled with the plurality of HFGW generators induces curvature singularities in its close proximity, generating a gravitational well in its flight path, thereby rolling down this space-time curvature dip in a manner analogous to surfing. This hybrid craft would move with great ease through air, space, water mediums by being enclosed in a vacuum plasma shield, just like you mentioned, due to the coupled effects of the EM field-induced air-water particles repulsion and the local vacuum energy state polarization. The controlled motion of charged matter under rapid acceleration transients may lead to room temperature superconductivity. We may be able to say that the HFGWG device has the capability of inducing a local phase transition from a turbulent regime to a laminar regime, thus allowing for smooth sailing of the hybrid craft through a specially conditioned vacuum space. Nuclear fusion may also be engineered using the concept at hand, given that the high plasma densities and temperatures, as well as the high energy confinement times, which can be achieved with the generation of an ultra-high electromagnetic field intensities. At the disruption point, energy may be amplified to such a degree as to generate a space-time curvature singularity, leading to the total destruction of a planetoid/asteroid. Now, what this means here is we're talking about fusion power. We're talking about teleportation, which we just mentioned. We are talking about the ability of super destructive weapons that could potentially destroy whole planetoids or planets or even a sun. And then, as Jake was mentioning, if you open the system up, you can theoretically borrow from the space time vacuum energy so that you are actually outputting more energy than you're putting in. And that's what this starts to lead to everything that we would refer to as just basically magic, but happens to be supported by actual science. And as hard as it is to believe, this stuff seems to be true based on what we've seen in several videos, including the MH370 ones. So awesome summary, Jake. I'll put this in the chat, so in the pill as well.
Yeah, I also just put up all the patents that were filed by Salvador Pius, and which just so happens to mean savior of our nation, by the way. And they were declassified by Donald Trump. I just put them in the nest. The patents, all 3 links are there if you want to check them out. And yes, please put whatever you have up there, Ash. Now, I want to run by you kind of for the people in the audience that may not have fully understood what it is that you just read. I want to just kind of run by you the idea in layman's terms and tell me if this is reflective of what it is that you understand. So, because the entirety
Generation
of
Z
the
should air
universe
in a week or so.
is basically almost like a quantum cosmic hologram based on the same sacred geometric structures from large to small. In layman's, like the atom's structure is very similar to a solar system's structure, or a galaxy structure is similar to, for example, a molecule structure or something like that. In the way that like stars share planets and stars share orbits with each other, it's similar to how, you know, certain atoms are sharing electrons and stuff like that in a molecule, yada yada yada. Because of the similarity in the sacred geometric structure of quantum and cosmic objects, when you tap into the quantum realm, you're kind of like tapping into something that can be amplified to macro physical objects. So you're going from a micro to a macro, and you're basically amplifying the frequency from this really small, quote unquote, small realm that is kind of, in a way, its own little version of the universe. You're kind of amplifying that signal or that frequency, and you're using it and scaling it up to surround a certain craft that allows the craft to almost behave as though it is a quantum particle that's skipping across space and time, similar to the way that like a skipper stone is able to skip across the surface of water when thrown correctly.
Yeah, I think David Grush even mentioned that analogy you just made about the skipping stone, which is really interesting. And if I were to quote theoretical physicist Roy D. Herbert, which you can find him at Roy D. Herbert, who has a theory of time dilation theory, you know, he would say that the properties denote the behavior, irrespective of size. And so what this means is you can still scale up something that's a quantum like an atom. And if you scale it up to something on the macro level and you can have the same properties of something on the macro level, it will have the same behavior. And this then also can apply to things that are extremely large, like neutron stars. And he would even say that the LIGO experiments would prove this type of phenomenon as well. Now, people that think that macro and quantum unification is science fiction, I would say go ahead and Google it. You will find that this is really cutting edge stuff that's just coming out even the last few years, even a lot of papers in the last few days that have been coming out. You know, we will find a unification theory of quantum and macro. I think it's already out there and it's been suppressed. But when we do that, then it will open the whole, all of science up to stuff that we would consider to be magic right now.
Right. And magic is just understanding of reality in a way that goes beyond our paradigm. You know, it goes beyond our understanding of quote unquote physics or something like that. So if you have something like an ancient rishi or an ancient master that understood these concepts, and then they were able to, in one way or another, embody the quantum field within their own consciousness field, because human beings are innately apart and interconnected to this much larger hologram. We affect it, we affect the matrix. Then we as individuals, in one way or another, can act like one of these craft through our consciousness field. And this is where we get into things like remote viewing or astral projection and bilocation, because essentially what we're talking about doing with craft, the human body is able to do with its consciousness field, which is interconnected or quantum entangled entangled to the entirety of the universe as a whole. And we, as individuals, just as craft, are able to do things like, say, navigate through what are called vortexes or wormholes. These are black and white holes. So we all know a black hole is basically like a massive dark star that its own gravity cannot escape. That's why they call it a dark star. But there's a lot of belief that these quote unquote black holes are actually like open holes in the fabric of space and time, and everything that passes the event horizon ends up getting sucked into this thing and transported to another location somewhere else, and ends up coming out of what is called a white hole, which is basically where energy is just continuing to spew out of this hole, quote unquote, in space and time. And it's like it is a wormhole, and it's based on frequency. It's yin and yang, it's south pole and north pole of a much larger electromagnetic field. And so human beings and craft are able to navigate these vortexes, which are present both on a quantum scale and on a cosmic scale. Our body, our chakras, our vortexes, our electromagnetic field as a whole is a vortex. The Earth has several different vortexes, thousands of vortexes all over the planet. And this is where the ley lines cross. This is where the gravity or the spin of the Earth is felt or more present than in other locations based on, say, the elements in the ecosystem, metals and mountains and stuff like that, as well as the height of these objects or the low of these objects relative to the spin of the Earth. And so these vortexes end up actually dispensing things like water and minerals and stuff like that within the ecosystem as they spin. They're what cause, storms to form, etc., because of the electromagnetic nature to these locations and the spin of these locations based on how high they are above sea level.
This is all very educational.
Do you have any opinions on that? Does any of that you want to comment on?
There's a couple things. Yeah, I think that the idea that everything's made up of vibrations is something that we should consider, right? Even though everything looks very solid to us, even solid matter is still potentially just vibrations. And what we're talking about is just different phase states, right? Between plasma, solid, gas, liquid. The other thing I really liked is the idea, and I liked this before I even got too much into UFOlogy and was interested in it, is the idea that black holes and white holes are, opposites of one another. The symmetry. We see so much symmetry everywhere in the universe, right? So you would expect if there's something sucking everything in, then there should be something pushing everything out on the other side, right? And that also leads me to the idea of what if a Big Bang is just a white hole, right? And maybe if you think in this idea of there being, either multi-dimensions, or if we're in a multiverse, that, maybe for every black hole, there's a white hole. And so every black hole is essentially just sucking matter and information in, and that's spitting it out somewhere else, which is creating another universe. That's just a thought experiment. There's no hard evidence for that in general, but I like the idea of symmetry in nature myself.
Well, it's yin and yang, so there is a balance. And in order for the universe itself to remain stable, in order for this sacred geometric structure that is a fractal in nature and can be layered on top of infinitely, there must be some sort of harmonic balance. There must be an equal exchange. So yes, I think it's even been proven that black holes and white holes exist on a quantum level. And there's a lot of theories out there that there's suppressed information about them not just finding black holes out in the galaxy, but also finding white holes as well. So this idea of cosmic and quantum black holes and white holes would only make sense as far as holding the structure of the universe together as a whole. Now, regarding, and I kind of want to get your opinion on this, regarding on other technologies that have been classified in these DUMBs and these special access programs, there's things like the cigar-shaped craft that are out there, and their use of what are called tachyon engines. For those of you that don't know what tachyons are quantum particles that travel so fast through the dimensions of space and time that they actually travel backward through what we would perceive as time. And so they're going from future to past as opposed from past to future. And so there's this theory that what a lot of these craft now that we have that actually supersede the level of technology of something like a TR-3B what these craft have is tachyon engines that actually tap into this higher dimensional level, this higher dimensional
Interesting. I
quantum
agree. Everything is
realm,
frequency and
where
vibration.
they're able to use these tachyons to travel at multiples of c, to travel through this tachyon level of the quantum scale, kind of like what you were saying about scaling things up from quantum to
Dude,
like
he
a
really
macro
impresses me. This
size
is
object,
wild.
scaling it up from that level, so they're able to travel through space and time at multiples of c by the use of tachyons.
Yeah, and you know more about that than I do for sure. I didn't have much background on that, but what I will add to it is that time dilation is real. I don't think a lot of people realize that time dilation is real. So, again, Roy D. Herbert would say that time is a fluid symmetry. And what this means is space time is one and the same, and your time is going to flow differently depending on how much mass you're near. And this also then applies to moving at the speed of light, and why you might have this time dilation effect the faster that you go, depending on how far you go. So, what that means is essentially if you are going at the speed of light, your time may appear that you get to your location very quickly, but from the observer's perspective, years, hundreds, tens of years could go by. The best example that I give with this is that the more mass you're next to, the slower your time is going to flow. So if you go next to a black hole, your time is going to flow very slowly. If you're very far away from mass, your time is going to go faster. What this means locally is that on the planet, we all experience time very similarly because we're all on the surface of the Earth. But even if you go up into outer space, your time is going to flow faster than if you're on the surface of the planet. And this has all been proven. This isn't, pseudoscience or anything. It's been proven for decades. Now, the example, if you watch the movie Interstellar, you'll find Matthew McConaughey go to a planet that's near a black hole, and they are only supposed to stay there for a few minutes because of the time dilation effect. And then they go from a space station that's out further away, and when they get stuck there for like an hour or two, now they come back and they get to the space station. It's been 20 years for the person on the space station. Now, if you were to visualize this, the way it's reconciled is that if you're Matthew McConaughey on the planet and you're looking at the space station, it's going to look like the space station's going in super speed. If you're in the space station looking at Matthew McConaughey, it's going to look like he's moving in super slow motion, right? So this is how time dilation works. Very real concept, something that's vitally important for when we're talking about moving at the speed of light. When we're talking about something being teleported, really all we're saying is it's moving faster than the speed of light, which means there's going to be a time dilation effect. And what this means is even shows like Manifest, where I haven't watched the show actually, but this plane that theoretically goes through a vortex, if it goes through a wormhole, or really what we're saying there is if it achieves superluminal speeds, it's possible for it to show up in the future from the perspective of the people who are on the outside, right? That same concept applies for the people that are on the planet or in the plane, right? That it's only going to be like it was instantaneous or a few minutes have gone by, but from the people from the outside, it could be years, right? So this is very important to understand from a scientific perspective. Thanks, Jake.
Well, and what I think is really interesting about that is that I personally have seen unidentified aerial phenomena. I've seen like these blue and orange spheres in the sky, and they would pop in existence and then pop out of existence, pop in and pop out, but in different locations in the sky. And I've also seen the cigar-shaped craft. They have what looked like an interference field around them that kind of distorts the things that, like, if you're looking through the field, it kind of distorts what's behind it. I've also seen TR3Bs. So these things are real, and when you see them, it's a whole other experience. I've also seen cloaked craft as well. And it's interesting how I've heard, especially as I've done a lot of research in these things, that there's some people that can see them, and there's some people that can't. There's some people that can look up and see the craft, and other people that they could just be pointing right at it. It's right there in front of them, but some people can't see them. And this kind of is where I think it comes into like the mental capacity of the individual to fathom and grasp the craft's existence, number one, or how open the third eye would be of the individual to perceive these frequencies beyond the five senses. And it also makes me think about the Toltec priests, or the Toltec shaman that was on the coast looking at the Spaniard ships on the horizon and kind of scratching his head, not really able to wrap his mind around what it is. And none of the people in the tribe could really like see it or even understand there's something on the horizon. And then the shaman was able to like figure out what it was. Oh, that's a ship, and those are sails, and like that's a vessel, and there's people on it. And then once he was able to understand it, he was able to elevate the consciousness of the tribe to where they could perceive it as well. And so yeah, and also this idea of time dilation, you know, anybody that's smoked DMT knows that you can have an eternity in 15 minutes, you know? So I'm just saying time and perception go hand in hand. You know, what we perceive is time dilation is, in my opinion, it's based on where you're at in the quantum cosmic hologram, where your consciousness is at, where your physical body is at, etc. Now, one thing I also wanted to cover was, and tell me if you've done any research into this, is things like secret space programs and like the Dark Fleet or Solar Warden and stuff like that. Maybe some of the testimony of these whistleblowers that have come forward. One in particular I can think of is Corey Good. There's a lot of people that say he's full of crap, but you know that's going to happen in this kind of stuff. What's your opinion on the secret space program and like the Nazis having, you know, these craft and having explored the solar system and built bases on the moon and stuff like that?
Well, yeah, before I talk about that, which I don't have a ton of insight on that, but I think that I agree with you. Time is an illusion for sure. I think that the more we look into science, the more we look into the holographic principle, the more we understand the double slit experiment and the idea that we could have a quantum and macro unification. I think that means that we must live in a construct, which means that we only perceive time due to the way our biology is set up in a linear fashion. It's very possible that time may not be linear from the fourth dimension or somebody who's looking down on our reality. The other thing I would also say that I agree with too is this, you know, can we even see these orbs and these crafts? Like, I'm not sure with the visual eye can even pick them up. From the military perspective, I always thought it was very interesting when I looked at those 2017 FLIR videos that they were using infrared. It almost seems like we are using infrared because we know we might not be able to see them clearly or in the visual spectrum, or that this can give the most information that's out there. I think this also goes to the MH370 videos where we see these three orbs. We see the non-radiating barrier around them in infrared in both videos. We still aren't sure if this is something you can visually see, or if you would see some type of space-time distortion or potentially see right through them or around them like you would see gravitational lensing from a black hole. So that's something I'm very interested in finding out. With respect to like secret space programs, my only experience or in terms of, you know, digging into the lore about that is Gary McKinnon when he hacked NASA. And I don't trust NASA at all. That's just my personal opinion. And I have my various reasons for that. But it wouldn't surprise me if they are airbrushing videos, if the DoD is preventing certain pictures from getting to NASA, that if we do have some type of essentially teleportation technology, then maybe we do have, you know, space force of astronauts that can go to other planets, maybe even to other stars. And I think Gary McKinnon was able to show that they were airbrushing pictures according to his some of the stuff he found when he hacked them. In addition to that, we might have these interstellar, military operatives. So I just think that's really interesting. I don't have any hard evidence for it, but yeah. Go ahead.
Well, what's interesting about Gary McKinnon is that he was looking for information on free energy. He wasn't even really looking for UFOs. He was looking for information on free energy, and he was able to hack these computers because their password was password. You know, it's like, wow, yeah, that's a real great security defense. That's a great line of defense you got there. And I think he also hacked things like Navy servers or military servers and Air Force and stuff as well, not just NASA. And what he found was that there was like a list of non-terrestrial officers and non-terrestrial craft that were on the books. And he even found like pictures of the Tic Tac UFOs or the cigar-shaped UFOs and stuff like that before he was finally discovered and kicked off the server. Now, what's even more interesting is that the government went after him and tried to get him on treason charges or espionage charges, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. And well, if they have nothing to hide, if everything that he found or discovered or was blowing the whistle about was a total fabrication, then why would they go after him with the legal apparatus of the government? That just doesn't make sense. And he's a British national. He's not even an American, you know. So I mean, to me, it's like, ye protest too much, deep state American government. Ye protest too much.
Yeah, and actually, the UK government protected him from being extradited actually to the United States. Like they were gonna try to throw him in prison, and espionage charges are no joke. As we know from the MH370 videos and the potential leaker, they tried to put that person in prison for life for espionage charges. So those are some of the most powerful charges they can throw against anybody. So it's a little bit weird if why are you trying to get him on these huge charges if like he didn't really hack anything that was important, right? And then the other bit I would say, and I'm going to be very careful how I mention this, is that just from my experience in general, I'll say life experience, that many companies do not have very good IT protection, as you would say. So it would not surprise me at all that you could just do password 123 and find your way. And a lot of hacks end up being very low tech hacks, like that type of stuff as well, where I would say your information is not nearly as protected as you probably think it is, unless you are with a company that's very top, getting up to date with everything and putting in the most recent security updates out there. So just stuff to keep in mind, guys.
Now, moving on really quick, I would like to talk for a second about Dr. Stephen Greer and his CE5 experiments. That for those of you that don't know what CE5 is, that's Close Encounters of the Fifth
Yeah, the
Kind.
InfoWars was really good.
So Close Encounters
That's
of the First Kind, if I'm not
legit.
mistaken, is when you see things like evidence of some sort of UFO or something like that, like a crop circle. Close Encounters of the Second Kind would
Alex
be
Jones
when you see something like a UFO in the area. Close Encounters of the Third Kind is when you if I'm not mistaken, it's like when you actually like make contact somehow, some way. Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind is like getting abducted. And then what he's calling a Close Encounter of the Fifth Kind is where you make contact with these interdimensional beings and they come in answer the phone basically when you call them, and they manifest in the astral realm or in the skies above Earth. And Dr. Stephen Greer would go out to really high mountaintops or sacred sites and stuff, and he would do this mantra where he would basically astral project himself out into the universe and basically like almost like create like a homing beacon of sorts and say, hi, I'd like to make contact. And then he'd follow a trail all the way back down to his body and leave the trail for these interdimensional entities to follow. And then they would follow and they'd come down and he'd make contact with them by seeing them up in the sky. And they were doing things that like defied the laws of physics, like moving around in like Z forms or S forms and stuff like that, where it's clearly not an airplane, it's clearly not a satellite, it's defying the laws of physics. And he would also do things like bringing like industrial lasers from like rock concerts and stuff, and he'd shine them up at these objects floating around in the upper atmosphere, and they'd like beam light back down at them. And he said it was basically through like almost like a telepathic communication, using the frequency of our thoughts to tap into the quantum entangled field of the universe and make contact with these higher dimensional beings that exist beyond the perception of our five senses. Are you familiar with anything regarding that stuff, Ash?
Yeah, and I'm not sure how much I, buy into a lot of it. I mean, I think that there's definitely a link between consciousness and whatever is going on with our reality. I think it's almost undeniable. Some people would even argue that our consciousness creates our reality. I have watched the CE5. I think it was like a documentary. I don't remember which channel, one of the TV stations or web channels or whatever, with Dr. Greer. And I do think Dr. Greer definitely had some inside information, especially back in like the Clinton era. But for me, I think there's something there. I don't know what exactly is my personal opinion, and I keep an open mind on everything, to be honest with you, especially after all the stuff that I've seen in the last few months. So I don't know whether or not how much weight there is to a lot of that stuff, but I do think it's definitely something worth looking into and digging into, especially on the consciousness angle.
Have you ever seen like a UAP or a UFO or had any sort of a paranormal experience yourself?
I haven't yet. I'm kind of waiting for that to happen. One thing I would say is that if you fly on airplanes, I think people should look out the window more often. I used to fly a lot, and one thing I noticed is everybody has their windows down. Nobody ever really looks out the window. Kind of makes me think like maybe all we have to do is just look up, right? And just actually look around and be aware of our surroundings. It almost feels like everybody's just head down all the time, looking at their phone. On the airplane, everybody's asleep, got their windows closed. So if I could, send a message to anybody, let's look up, right?
I hear you on that. Now, as somebody that has seen UFOs or UAPs and had paranormal experiences, I can tell you from experience that these things are real. As a shamanic
325 people in here.
practitioner, I have dealt with interdimensional beings and entities. I have,
I love
you
Jake,
know,
man.
made
I love this guy.
contact with angelic beings. I have warded off and fought with demonic entities and kicked them out of ecosystems and stuff like that. I have seen incredible things that most people would say is impossible. And so from experience, that's why I'm saying, like, when it comes to Dr. Stephen Greer and the CE5 and stuff like that, as well as if you look into ancient traditions and the lore, the legends of our ancient ancestors and stuff like that, if you look at the cave paintings or the petroglyphs and stuff like that, then you can kind of see that people have been making contact with these interdimensional astral entities for a long time. The Native Americans call them star people, and they call the knowledge that the shaman has star knowledge.
This is a sweet space
because it's beyond the five senses. It gets to a point to where
it's
beyond the use of words. It's beyond syntax. And that's actually, you know, without diving too much into it, that's one of the things that psychedelics do, is they actually bring the brain into a place that goes beyond syntax. It disrupts the syntactical portions of the brain and kind of forces us to perceive the objective world beyond our mind's perception and beyond syntactical cognitive patterns of reality and into a whole other level of perception. And I think that's part of the reason why they have such profound effects when it comes to things like treating depression and stuff like that. But the contact with the spirit world and contact with angelic entities is something, as we started in the beginning talking about, goes back thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years. And recognizing good spirits from bad spirits is what shamanism is all about. Recognizing angelic entities from demonic entities is what being a prophet is all about. And if you look into, for example, the ancient biblical text, what's one of the first things that the angel always says to the prophet that they approach? Do not be afraid.
I like this guy more than I like
when you experience this stuff, dude, it is like otherworldly, so bizarre, out of your head. Oh my God, I can't believe this is actually happening. It makes me think of the Tool song Rosetta Stone, you know, because my heart is racing because this shit never happens to me, you know? So,
hey, Neo.
When we integrate our consciousness, which is quantum entangled, to the unified field, or what quantum physicists are calling non-local consciousness or God consciousness, Godhead. When we integrate ourselves into that level, we are attaining higher levels of perception that go beyond the five senses, to the point to where you're able to feel the earth turning. You're able to feel the sun burning. You're able to feel the galaxy itself churning. You're able to perceive the universe existing moment by moment by moment, and it is blissful because you're able to experience this unified field and the presence, the omnipresence of God, which is on a quantum and a cosmic scale. And what our government or what these corporations are trying to do is tap into the understanding of this unified field and expand upon our understanding of the physics of it and create tools, new tools that are based on this knowledge of how the universe operates. Now, you can go the technological route with it, or you can go the spiritual ascension route with it. And what I think is happening is that the government is attempting to create craft that will allow them access to these higher dimensions that sages and saints, prophets and shaman have been accessing for thousands of years. They're trying to do it through technology as opposed to spiritual development. And in many cases, this is because they're trying to, in not all cases, but in many cases, weaponize these things so that they can do things like what you were saying earlier, destroy planets, destroy, you know, asteroids, or even suns and stars.
I crapped all over.
And that is why a lot of the,
you know,
talking the UFO community is that there's these high-level civilizations that have spiritually ascended say, well, look, we could give you the technology, we could help you understand it, but you guys are going to use it for destructive purposes. You're going to try to weaponize it. And you guys are not advanced enough at this point to, you know, actually have these tools in your
Thanks,
repertoire
Comp Lizard.
and not
I don't know what
use them
DHP is.
toward destructive purposes. You know,
I
I
actually
had
don't
a
know what it
quote that
is.
I
Yeah.
said and I put out on a tweet that says, only a primitive society would choose mutual slaughter as a solution to their problems. And Aldous Huxley once said, man is unique in organizing the mass murder of his own species. So, in order for us to really begin to get into the use of these technologies, we have to come to terms with the fact that our consciousness is one that is mass consciousness is one that is based on the illusion of separation, not the truth of unity. And only when we begin to integrate ourselves into this truth of unity in this unified field will we begin to spiritually ascend to the point to where we don't need craft to enter these dimensions. We don't need craft to move our way through the vortex system of quantum entangled vortexes in the universe and expand our consciousness to galactic size. And I know that's far out for a lot of people, but if we can do it with a craft, if you're able to understand this stuff and you're able to do this stuff like, you know, creating an anti-gravity field, or, you know, circumventing the laws of physics by expanding a quantum frequency to a macro physical object, and our physical bodies are a part of that larger unified field, then we're able to do this with our consciousness. We're able to do this with our electromagnetic field, and yes,
This is my
expand it
only
to
ever
these
interaction with
higher
Jack
level
Sarfati, guys.
octaves
Only ever
of
interaction.
creation that exist within the cosmos.
Does this sound
And
like a
so,
scientist to you?
you know, that's my little rant there about that, and why it is that I do think that Dr. Greer may be onto something here, because it's something that has been going on for thousands and thousands of years. Your thoughts on everything I just said, Ash?
Yeah, I think that the whole idea that like hallucinogens or drugs may end up, you know, allowing us to experience states of consciousness and reality that are heightened is something that's very interesting. I know that they use them for medical purposes, as you just mentioned. Now, I myself have to avoid them because I do have a security clearance, and that's one of the no-nos that's out there. But some people wanted me to ask about DMT and DHP, and don't answer too quickly on those because it'll give away the game. I was talking to somebody in the Alien Addict chat, and I said, "What's DMT?" And he answered like in a split second. I'm like, "Okay, well, you obviously know what's going on there." But yeah, so I'm curious as to if, you know, we don't need to talk about specific drugs and stuff like that. I don't want to advocate for drug use, but you know, I do think that there is probably something there in terms of kind of opening up our minds a little bit more to either different realities or a heightened sense of reality. Not exactly sure.
Well, DMT is a neurotransmitter. It is produced by the pineal gland. A lot of people think it's produced by the pineal gland. I assert that it is produced by the pineal gland. It's produced in our brain all the time. It's actually what gives our vision color and depth. But when we are born, when we are in REM sleep and dreaming, and when we die, it is produced in massive, massive, heavy amounts in the brain. And in the process, it almost like heightens the frequency of our consciousness. You see, according to the Heart Math Institute, our DNA has these little antennae on the DNA that are responsible for sending and receiving light and information. And all based on the frequency within the electromagnetic field of the
I like
body,
how he
going
has
all
a
the way
picture
down
of
to this
Einstein in
DNA
the
level,
background.
that dictates
Einstein
how
would
many of
spit
these
on Jack
antennae on the
Sarfati.
DNA are activated. So
This
if
guy's
it's
a
a
complete
low
jackass.
frequency of fear, then that wavelength is going to map over the DNA and activate very few portions of the DNA and very few of these antennae. But if it's a high frequency thought or emotion or frequency in the electromagnetic field, then it's going to activate far more of these antennae that are responsible for sending and receiving light and information. And the more of these antennae you activate, the more access you have to higher levels of information, the more ability your brain has to process the information and retain it, as well as the more access you have to, say, the information that's stored in your DNA. This is where we get into things like, you know, the Buddha remembering
Thanks,
past lives and
Complete
stuff
Art.
as he
Appreciate it,
ascended and
man.
became enlightened. Now, with DMT, what is happening is that you have raised the frequency of your consciousness on a molecular level through this neurotransmitter that is basically transports your consciousness to a really high frequency state of consciousness outside the confines of the physical body and into the astral realm or the spirit realm, where there are in fact entities, there are beings in this higher dimension. the entirety of the universe is alive. The spirit world is real. And that's actually one of the things about modern industrialist and materialism culture, is that they have focused so much on the material that they've forgotten about the metaphysical and the spiritual. And in the process, they've lost a massive chunk of who and what they are. And DMT or peyote or mushrooms or even cannabis, for that matter, ayahuasca, all of these things have the ability to reintegrate us into the spirit world or into these realms that go beyond the five senses. They also allow our brain to process more information. If you look into the effects of psilocybin on the brain during while the person is under the influence of the psilocybin mushroom, what you're going to find is massive amounts of neuroconnectivity. So much so that's like the whole brain is communicating. Both hemispheres are communicating with one another in heightened amounts of neuroconnectivity. And the more of these mushrooms you consume, the more that neuroconnectivity takes place, the higher the density and the volume of neuroconnectivity in the brain. And it's also, psilocybin is what is called a nootropic, which means that it allows the brain to create new brain cells. It allows new neurons to be created. Now, all of these things have the capacity to raise human consciousness beyond the five senses, to kind of open the third eye, and to chemically, in one way or another, kind of force the mind or the spirit out of the body and into these higher harmonic octaves of consciousness that go beyond normal perception. And what's interesting about that is they've done clinical studies where what they have found is that it's not so much that when you're under the influence of DMT or psilocybin or something, that you're perceiving things that are not there and therefore quote unquote hallucinating. What it actually is that your brain filters out a bunch of
Jack
stuff
thinks that Uri
that
Geller
is
can
not
bend
essential
spoons,
for
guys,
survival.
with his
And
mind.
that stuff that gets filtered out is then allowed to be
It's not
filtered
even the worst.
in the state of altered consciousness that these compounds provide. And this is why when tribes do things like peyote ceremonies, or when they do things like mushroom ceremonies or ayahuasca ceremonies, etc., what they find is that the group, the tribe, has the same quote unquote collective hallucination, because they're tapping into a higher topological manifold of these dimensions and how they intersect with our own.
Jack hates dogs,
and in the process,
guys.
they get a glimpse into the sacred geometric
Jack
structure
doesn't
of
think
the
dogs can be
universe itself,
conscious.
and this information that's
I'll tell my
being
dog
filtered out by the
that she's
brain
just a
because it's
robot.
not essential for survival.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for that understanding.
Absolutely. So moving on, let's talk for a second, because we're coming up on an hour and 15 minutes, and I want to try to keep this brief. I know that you
Appreciate it, man.
had a busy day, Ash.
Oh, no, we can keep going. This has been awesome, man. I just want to, while we have a quick moment here, I think your knowledge and background is extremely impressive, man. I would have thought you're one of the major players in the UFO community with all this lore and insight to everything that's going on. I've appreciated this a lot. I think that we've got a good audience here, too, that's probably been appreciating it as well. So definitely excited to talk a little bit more about some of the implications. After I think we've only got a couple more topics, but one of the big things I want to talk about is like what disclosure means, and try to have a discussion about the implications of disclosure and some of the technology that we've talked about. And then if we have some time as well, we can do some questions. I'm going strong still, so appreciate you, Jake. Let's keep going.
Cool. All right, man. I'm down.
Nice.
Well, that was actually one of the things I wanted to get into, was disclosure and
Thanks,
our
Ben.
role
Take it easy,
in
man.
disclosure, us as individuals, because obviously anytime that the government gets into hot water or deep water, what do? Aliens! Aliens! Look, we got aliens. There's UFOs. Go look over there. Don't look at Biden and his schemes with China. Don't look at Hunter Biden's laptop and his indictment. No, it's aliens. It's aliens. So what we have to do is recognize misinformation, disinformation from real information. And we can't be magpies here and chase the shiniest object. There's a lot of people that chase the whole Roswell thing,
this guy, guys?
and they lose complete sight of collective consciousness and the role of our consciousness field, because they're chasing this notion of like shiny craft in New Mexico. Oh boy,
this guy's blowing me
right?
away.
So our role in disclosure is changing the dialogue and controlling the narrative. And rapid disclosure, it has ramifications, economic, social, technological, environmental, political, and yes, most certainly sociological and psychological ramifications. Because most people are living in an echo chamber that's controlled by mechanisms that are entirely based on misinformation and disinformation. And so creating a new mental model of reality for people to live within, other than the echo chamber that they live in, or other than worrying about, what Kim Kardashian's ass looks like or who won the football game. This is going to be difficult because these are the people that have chosen to go this route of entertainment and apathy, as opposed to, infotainment or informing themselves and being entertained with that, and empathy. And that has created drastic ramifications for us as a species, and it's allowed for this breakaway civilization that is literally under our feet in the dumbs, that is literally hundreds, if not thousands of years more advanced than anything that's on the surface, to rule us from underneath the soil.
Yeah, he's nailing it.
You guys, there's a dumb outside of or inside of every single major metropolitan city in the United States and around the world. And it is from these dumbs that certain things like quote unquote national security is maintained. But in many ways, these dumbs are being used to ensure that the populations remain inside of the mental box that has been created for them. And yeah, things like, UAP Disclosure Act or whatever. Okay, glad to hear that you guys are finally talking about it. But at the same time, we do want some form of rapid disclosure, not some sort of drip thing. And that's because there's people like yourself and myself, Ash, and people in the audience that have already done the research. And we're like, yeah, we know, we can handle it. Let's do this. But let us not forget that when we first started getting into this stuff, the cognitive dissonance that took place was so radical, it was so mind-blowing, that to suddenly thrust upon everybody the truth. I mean, there's talk that the moon itself is like a hollowed out space station of sorts. You know what I'm saying? So like, oh my God, if that's true, or like Cydonia on Mars, and the mathematical precision to the what look like pyramids or the face on Mars and stuff like that, the way it creates like a Merkaba, and how that relates quite possibly to the fact that there's literally radioactive isotopes on Mars that can only be generated due to artificial nuclear explosions. All of these things. The moon of Mars, Phobos, has an obelisk that's like a mile high on it, constantly pointing down at the planet. Buzz Aldrin talks about it. Yep. Buzz Aldrin also talks about in his interviews that we never went to the moon. You know what I'm saying? So the paradigm that has been created for people is so confining that rapid disclosure will have dramatic psychological and sociological effects, as well as technological, economic, environmental, political. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't happen. What it means is that it needs to be done strategically, but it needs to not be in the hands of the very institutions that have been controlling the narrative the whole time, whether it be Majestic 12 or it be the CIA or the NASA or what have you. It needs to be in the hands of the people. And the only way that we can get it in the hands of the people is if we change the dialogue, if we're able to understand how this technology works, which means we have to do our homework. Mm-hmm. And we have to understand how this technology works, not just in a way that we understand, but in a way that we so simply understand it that we're able to relay the concept to other people in a way that they can understand and also relay to another more easily. And in the process, that's how the truth ends up getting out. That's how the dialogue gets changed. And that's what prepares us as a population for a more rapid disclosure to unfold. Your thoughts, Ash?
Man, yeah, you hit a lot of really important parts there. So first I would talk about the ontological shock. The ontological shock factor is huge. It hit me hard when I first started investigating MH370 videos. It wasn't a situation where I just believed everything right away. It took a lot of evidence for me to understand that quantum and macro can be unified. It was to the point where it seemed more likely to me that space aliens would land on my front lawn and say hello to me than I'd be in the situation I am now. to the point that I actually had to ask my own parents, am I in some kind of Truman Show situation prank going on? Because it was so unbelievable to me. So ontological shock hits people hard. The cognitive dissonance hits people very hard with respect to this type of technology being real. People think that it can't be true that I get lied to by CNN and all the mainstream medias, and that it can't be true that my academic teachers don't know everything there is to know about the world. And I think this comes down to this human hubris and ego that we have, that we are at the pinnacle of civilization. Everything we know right now is the most advanced that we'll ever be, right? But I would say if you look at it from the perspective of us being cave people right now, then that means that we have so much more further to advance. And it shouldn't be that amazing, because when we look at stuff, we have like AGI. I've just learned it's artificial general intelligence, which is hyper advanced AI, quantum computers. Like, all this stuff is out there in the open. The scientific papers that are trying to unify quantum and macro right now are out there. You can go read them yourselves right now. Understanding the technology, super important. That's what breaks down the ontological shock. That's the whole reason why I started my own podcast. I never wanted to be a podcaster or anything like that, because I just wanted to be able to understand the science in the MH370 videos. The unification of quantum and macro, room temperature superconductivity, this idea that we can have a non-radiating barrier, that we can create a field that can displace us from space-time, that can reduce mass to zero. I think that this type of technology leads to exactly what you talked about, breakaway civilizations. I would almost argue that the U.S. military-industrial complex has already achieved breakaway status. 4 months ago, before this at all began for me, I would have said that China may already be trying to catch up to us, right? Now I would say, no, we are so far advanced that it's just absurd, that all the wars out there are just for money. We could end any war in just an instant if we wanted to. And that probably explains why we haven't really been attacked, except for potentially, on 9/11. And that was a low-tech attack, right? Even if you take the official narratives there, that's just a low-tech attack of people using planes against us, right? It's not a situation where we're getting some huge military attack. It's not Red Dawn or anything like that, right? I think that those things are things of the past, pretty much. I don't think we'll ever see another war like that, given this type of technology. I also just want to make a quick side note on the monoliths on Mars and Phobos. I think if you look at Mars, it seems like life on Mars is being hidden from us. There is seasonal methane on Mars, which can't really be explained by geology, because it would have dried up over the billions of years that Mars has been out there. It almost has to be at least bacterial life on Mars. I think that when we start looking around, we're going to find life everywhere. We're going to find it on Europa, we're going to find it on Mars, etc. And we may not find advanced life, but even just find bacterial life means that life is everywhere in the entire universe. And I'm starting to wonder if is it abigenesis? Is that the right term? The ancient astronaut theory, or whatever you want to call it, where like maybe we developed on Mars, and then maybe people left Mars, destroyed the planet, then they moved over to Earth, or maybe it was just a matter of bacteria or other things floating freely from Mars to Earth, and maybe that's how life is seeded throughout the entire galaxy. So I think that we need to keep our minds open to these things. Go ahead.
Well, speaking to what you're talking about, you, I think, commented on that video where somebody had a mix, I think it was of cornstarch and water on top of a speaker, and sound was being generated through it, and it looked like these humanoid structures were beginning to assemble, in the cornstarch and the water. This is where we get into the role of harmonics and cymatics, okay? And I have this theory that I know it's true, but it's going to take a lot of explaining, and I'm not going to get too deeply into it. If you want to check it out, you can watch my Aliens Walking Among Us video. It's on Rumble. But anyway, my Rumble is Yellowstone Wolf AZ, all one word, Yellowstone Wolf AZ. And you can find it there, Aliens Walking Among Us. But anyway, so our bodies are made up of the elements of the earth. We're largely carbon-based life forms, but we're like 70% water, and we're made up of all of the elements of the earth kind of like together in one package, right? Now, if you think about that whole thing with the cymatics and the cornstarch and the water on the speaker and all that stuff, and you think in terms of, like Nikola Tesla said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, right? So think about the idea that Earth is a harmonic octave. It is a cymatic frequency. And the Earth is the speaker. The frequency being channeled through the Earth is the electromagnetic field, the cycles of energy per second, the frequency.
Thanks for being here.
And then human life, all life on the planet for that matter, microbiological, macrobiological, they're all essentially like little grains of rice being moved on the
I've
speaker.
seen
They're
Alpha
all like
Warrior.
little, beings of cornstarch and water, or the elements of the earth, water, together, creating these forms in space and time that are based on the sacred geometric structure of the universe itself. This is why our body is based on phi and the phi ratio. This is why we look around and we see the sacred spiral of the Fibonacci spiral in plants, in seeds, in you name it, everything, in the turn of a hurricane or a tornado, in the way that a wave arches and crashes onto a shore. It's because it's all based on the same sacred geometric principles and the same mathematical ratios, which means it's all based on different forms of harmonics. And it's these patterns manifesting on Earth are based in the code, or the schematics of the metaphysical world, the mathematical ratios associated with harmonic frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we look at other planets, we see similar but very different cymatic patterns. So Venus has its own cymatic pattern, and obviously it's not based on water and carbon. But that doesn't necessarily mean that life doesn't exist. It could just simply be life that exists beyond our perception of carbon-based, water-based life forms, and is present in another form of the elements conglomerating together based on a different cymatic frequency that is encoding those elements to create a different form of life. And it's the same thing throughout the rest of the universe. There's speculation, for example, that within the storms on Jupiter, there may very well be beings that are on that planet that are more like electrical than they are physical, moving through the gas of Jupiter. And I know that sounds far out, believe me.
Not really.
But just because our life on this planet is based on carbon and H2O doesn't mean that that is how it has to be everywhere else. In my opinion, all you need for life to be present is a stable harmonic frequency that is moving the elements in a way that is coherent, and that creates for these sacred geometric patterns to manifest on lower and higher quantum and cosmic scales. Does any of that make sense to you, Ash?
No, yeah, definitely. And I think the whole idea that if we're looking for life on other planets, we need to have a much more open mind. I don't think we should just be looking for humanoids, right? I think even people argue that the planet of Titan could use like silicon as a replacement for carbon, and we might need to look for life forms that are completely different. There's the show I was just talking about, I think the other day on HBO, called Scavenger's Reign, which is one of the most, I guess, trippy kind of shows, where this idea of the far future, these miners get trapped on this planet, and the life is so different than what we would expect on Earth. I mean, the reason why I would have people watch it is because it kind of opens your mind to how different life might be able to be on different planets, where it's evolved differently and advanced differently. So I think that's really interesting. One thing I just want to say, I want to do some shout outs to a few people who are in the chat right now, just because I appreciate you guys being here. Red Panda, Bill Elmore, Alpha Warrior, Maze Love, Bruce Fenton, Mellow Demon, Stoned Ape, King Milkfart Harassment Archive, Brown Eyed Girl, I already mentioned Red Panda, but and the rest of the people that I might not be able to see because I can only see like the first 100 or so. But thank you guys for being here. I know you guys have been around, following, supporting, having spaces. Just want to appreciate you guys real quick. And yeah, the other thing I would say is Tesla. Feels like Tesla was onto something a long, long, long time ago. And I'm very curious to read more about Tesla and his theories in general, because I think that the more we look into this, everything that I've learned, it goes back to electrical engineering. If you want to know the cutting edge science that's out there, look into electrical engineering. I think that that's where we can find this unification of the forces, and where we can explain stuff like gravity, quantum gravity, and a lot of the advanced technology that we're talking about.
Well, and Nikola Tesla also said that once we start investigating non-physical phenomena, we will make more progress in a year or two than we have in the past several hundred. And so he understood the secrets of the universe. He also spoke about the magnificence of the 3, the 6, and the 9, and unlocking the secrets of existence. He understood harmonics. He understood energy, frequency, and vibration. And yeah, thank you for giving a shout out to all those people, because I know a number of those names that you mentioned. God bless you guys. Thank you for being here. And we are going to open the floor to questions relatively soon. We just have a couple of things that we're going to cover, and then we'll open the floor. And those other things are, how do we go about mitigating damage regarding to our socioeconomic, geopolitical, sociological, environmental, psychological systems, and at the same time, create a more rapid unfolding to disclosure. How do we do this? What can we do as individuals, and what can we do as a collective when we begin to understand this technology, how it works, and how we can roll it out? And I'll give you an example. So before, and I'm just telling you what I've heard. I'm not trying to, whoa, I did this, I did that. I'm just telling you what I've heard, and I'm trying to help empower you as an individual by telling you the story. So before I got into spaces in after May 25th of 2023, from what I've heard in a lot of these spaces, there was no real talk of Dr. Rife and Dr. Rife, that's R-I-F-E, and his machine, and how it works using frequencies and vibration to kill disease and to increase human health. But then I came into these spaces and I just kept talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. And there was a lot of pushback. There was people like, don't talk about that. Don't talk about that. No, nobody wants to hear that, or nobody understands that. Quit talking about that. This is what we're talking about. This is what we're talking about. And I'm like, yeah, but no. This right here, man. Once everybody understands that this right here is possible, the whole game changes. We need to talk about this. We need to converse about this now, because once we start talking about it, once we control the narrative, once we change the dialogue, then the healthcare industry will reflect that change. Then everybody will create the demand for this technology to emerge into the medical sector. And lo and behold, after about 5.5 months, maybe less or more of time talking about this, and just, keep on doubling down on this, there was a patent that was released and approved by the FDA, which they'd been sitting on this stuff for ever since the 1930s with Dr. Rife, where they were using sound to destroy tumors and literally melt them in 7 minutes. Okay, so you can use sound similar to how you can use sound and frequency to destroy a wine glass. You can use sound and frequency to destroy invasive tissue like cancer or parasites or invasive microbiological organisms like fungi or viruses and bacteria, etc. So all you have to do is match the pitch, match the frequency of the cancer cell or the parasite or the fungus or the virus or whatever, and it will destroy all of those microbiological organisms without doing any damage to healthy human tissue. Now, this is a patent and a treatment that was just approved by the FDA, and lo and behold, it was predicated by me talking about this stuff, and then everybody else started talking about it, and then eventually it made its way onto Facebook, eventually it made its way onto Instagram, eventually it made its way onto TikTok, eventually it made its way back into our spaces where everybody's talking about it, and then boom, we manifested it, us together. We did this, you guys. We changed the dialogue, we created the demand, and we changed the world for the better. So when it comes to this technology that we're talking about, whether it be room temperature superconductors, 0-point energy engines, Tesla towers, and the infinite free clean wireless energy that they can bring us, Tesla tower technology, or Dr. Rife's machine, or the TR3B, what have you, 0-point energy, all these things, you guys. If we understand the technology and we have fun talking about it and how it works, then we change the dialogue. And once we change the dialogue, then the demand can be set, or the demand can be there and the precedent set. And once that precedent is set, it's now we control the dialogue. So now the Mockingbird media or the quote unquote deep state has to react to us, as opposed to us bouncing it off of them. They're bouncing it off of us. We're saying, no, this is what we want. We know how it works. We as humanity are ready. And this is the final point that I'll make, and then I'll turn it over to you, Ash, to get your feedback, is that when we start fathoming and grasping the totality of how this technology works, once we really get it and we grok it and we start talking about it, then that consciousness shift takes place in the collective mind. And all it takes is a large enough percent of us to actually shift the collective consciousness, to actually change the collective consciousness just enough to where it becomes pervasive all over the planet. And then the introduction of these technologies won't be such a radical shift. It won't be so crazy or give people such a cognitive dissonance. Then it'll actually almost be like we're hungry for it, we're thirsty for it, we're waiting for it.
Yeah, you nailed it, Jake. I think that what we're seeing here and what we're seeing in this space is a new guard, right? This is a new group of people that have an open mind, that are looking to what are the real implications of disclosure? What does the technology really mean? We're not just talking about flying saucers that are hovering around anymore. We're talking about what does this technology, what can it lead to? Right. I think you've impressed me so much during this space in general. Even though I don't agree with everything you said, I think that you've got a really good mind for what the implications are about this. I think that this technology, as you mentioned, can give power back to the people, take it away from the centralized government and make it go back to the people that deserve it. I think that if some of the applications that we're talking about, I think you hit a lot of these, but just to give people out there what we're talking about here, we're talking about faster than light communication. We're talking about force fields and cloaking. We're talking about the ability to teleport a macro scale object the same way we can quantum teleport an object. We're talking about annihilation in certain terms of being able to wipe out any type of missile, nuke, or anything that was sent to us. A perfect defense mechanism. From an energy perspective, we're talking about fusion power, maybe even portable fusion power. The power of the sun in the palm of your hand, to quote Spider-Man. We're talking about free energy, being able to have an open system that can produce more energy than we have to put into it because it can pull energy from the vacuum state of space-time. We're also talking about medical healing. This is something that Dave Rossi and I talked about in Hard Truths number 3. This is the idea that you can potentially even change or treat at the cellular level different types of cancers, ailments, etc. It even makes me wonder if we could reverse aging with this type of technology.
Yes, we can.
Awesome. And yeah, so I wouldn't mind living another 100 years, but I have a feeling I won't be living till I die of old age. And then lastly, doomsday weapons. Doomsday weapons. The ability to destroy an entire planet, potentially destroy our sun, maybe even create our own Big Bang. We need to not just look at the good that can happen out there, but what are the risks? And to your point, having the conversation opens the door up to breaking down the ontological shock and figuring out what is the proper way that we can disclose this information where we don't destroy ourselves, where we don't just become another species that failed in the Great Filter and the Fermi Paradox, whatever you want to look at it, and that we advance our civilization to a point where we deserve to be. You know, we can reshape the trajectory of our future with this type of technology. And to me, it's an exciting thing, and that's what I want to talk about. And I think we've done a lot of talking about it here today. So thank you very much, Jake.
Thank you. A couple of final points to make before we move on to questions is one of the things that I think will really help us get this dialogue shifted is not just us talking about it, but one of the things that will happen as a result of us changing the dialogue is something called open source intelligence. And Robert David Steele talks a lot about this. He's former CIA. He talks a lot about the need for open source intelligence because a lot of the reason why we have so much corruption in the government is because of the secrecy.
Why do these people have smiles next to their names?
A lot of the atrocities that are created by this corrupt government is done to keep these things a secret. So open source intelligence will allow this stuff to come out in a public way that will stop the corruption, because the corruption is there to reinforce this illusory system, this false paradigm that we're living within. And so with public disclosure, open source intelligence follows. Obviously, through legislation, that can also be done. The UAP Disclosure Act, okay, that's very nice. I'd like to read it. I'd like to know what it is that they're talking about, because if they're not talking about the introduction of some of this technology, then and just basically saying there are aliens. Oh, big deal. Thanks a lot. We knew that. Okay, moving on. Let's get to the tech that you got in the dumbs. Come on now. But also things like circumventing the Mockingbird media through the internet and through understanding how this technology works in such a way that what we say cannot be argued with. Whoa. And that most people, like I said, cannot just understand what we're saying, but then relay it to another in a way that they can
probably
understand.
On the ground.
We're also going to have to understand that once we get to this level, there will be infiltrators on behalf of some of these corporations that seek to profit from all this stuff. There will be infiltrators that try to dispense disinfo and misinfo into the movement to try to break it up and to stop it from taking place. So that's why it's so important for us to understand how this technology works and to understand it in a way that is simple. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it fully, to quote Einstein. So we need to be able to understand it fully so that we can explain it simply, so we can recognize the difference between misinformation and disinformation and real information. We also have to be able to do so in a way to where we're not easily distracted, we're not easily confused, and we're able to offer people clarity and very real solutions on how to move forward. And if and when we do all of those things, you guys, the sky's the limit. We are going to ascend spiritually, technologically, socially, physically. We are going to ascend into these higher levels and realms and dimensions that have been known about for millennia, for centuries, and have been being largely suppressed from the collective mind. Also, that less than 1% of the population can maintain their monopoly over our collective consciousness. Now, final points. Jenny, thank you for putting a bunch of stuff up here in the nest. If you guys want, you can check it out. I got a bunch of posts up there about Nikola Tesla's Tesla towers. I got stuff in there about beings of energy, frequency, and vibration and collective consciousness. There's stuff up there about the FDA approves the $12,000 treatment for the use of sound waves. Thank you for putting that up there. There's also, let's see here, the patents. Tesla's patents have been being made public. Dr. Reif's machine can also be made as well, and very cheaply, and how that can revolutionize everything. There's also one in here about, remember I was telling you about how planets have certain cymatic patterns to their frequency? There's one up here about every pattern in nature is based on energy, frequency, and vibration, and how all that stuff relates to Simatics. And there's a picture of the frequencies of the cymatic patterns to the planets in there. That one's really cool, as well as the planetary orbital rotation patterns relative to one another, and how they create much larger sacred geometric structures in our solar system, which is so freaking cool. And when you get into these higher levels and these higher dimensions of understanding, you begin to be able to experience and embody energy on that level, where you're able to process that these patterns are occurring. And this is why certain astrological alignments or solar cycles, lunar cycles, earth cycles are so important, because they're tapping us into this much larger pattern that goes beyond our five senses. We also got stuff in here about the TR3B, and Ash put his link in there regarding the thing that he was quoting from Salvador Payas's patent. And I have one here about the patents, and all three of the patents: room temperature superconductor, the TR3B, and the 0-point energy engine. And with that said, Ash, if you don't have anything further, what do you say we open the floor?
Yeah, I think so. And I just want to go ahead and thank you again, Jake. I think that you've done an awesome job here going through all this. I think you've impressed the hell out of me. You impressed the hell out of the people that are watching on my stream right now that were going through it. I mean, you impressed me the first time we talked, but this has just been an incredible, kind of journey of discovery here and going through a lot of this information. So I just want to thank you, and I'll be referring to you as Jake X Shaman from now on. I think that we need a rebranding out there from your persona, because I listen to you, and I hear somebody who really wants the best for humanity and has humanity's best at heart. So just once again, thank you for hosting this space with us, and for everybody for being here and jumping on. I think that we're merging a few different communities here together, and it's creating something pretty special. We're creating a force that can go up against the most powerful nation in the world here. So this has been awesome. Let's do some questions.
Cool. And one thing, I don't like the idea of going up against, because then we're creating a polarized position. What I like to think is we are circumventing these individuals.
Jake's such a nice
by
guy,
doing
man.
it ourselves and being the change that
I'm
we
way
wish
more
to
of
see.
a douche than
We
he
are not
is.
protesting. We are investing in each other, in the future, in humanity, in our children, in the environment. We are rendering the old system obsolete. We're not using our energy to fight the old. We're using our energy to build the new. We are making the old globalist, less than 1%er, full spectrum dominant system obsolete. And in that sense, there's no need to fight. I mean, these people are
awesome,
already
man.
on the defensive. That's
guy.
why they're censoring us. You see what I'm saying? Because they know they can't compete, dude. You can't compete with the truth, so they have to censor it. And that is a defense mechanism. This whole AI apparatus that they're creating is a defense mechanism. But that's where I'll end it. Let's see if Red Panda. I want to hear what you have to
So
say.
real quick, I want to add one more thing too, because I think that was a great point, Jake. I mean, you're much better at the unification with people than I am. I'm a little more prickly around the edges, but I just want to take the advice of somebody in my chat as well and officially make you an honorary member of MH370X. We're happy to have a shaman on our side. Thank you very much, sir. Welcome aboard.
I am honored. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and God bless everybody in your chat. I do want to hear, because if Red Panda is really well versed in this stuff, before we bring people up, I want to hear what Red Panda has to say.
Wow, great stuff, Jake. It's an honor to meet you. Been a fan of you for a while. I already knew you had some great knowledge when like everything happened, right? I kind of looked into you and I saw a video of you, and you're getting into like Blavatsky and Rudolf Steiner, and also like what you did today too, like 1952 stuff. Usually, see people have like the occult knowledge or they have the history, like blue book knowledge, but I recognized earlier you had both, so it's really an honor to be here. And I love Ashton. I love what he's doing. I think what he's doing is kind of speaking to what you're saying a lot too, like open source this stuff. Like we don't have to wait for the government to give us like this stuff. Like the whole MH370 thing has been super open source, and it's been really cool to see. And Ashton's been doing a great job compiling everything and like getting all the different pieces together and spreading the message. And it's become a meme that I say, like, become the Ashton of cash landom or stuff for people. Like we don't have to wait for the government and the as much as like you, I like the Disclosure Act. But yeah, I totally agree with a lot of the stuff you've been saying here today, and I'm excited to talk to you more. And I'm glad that you're like so well versed, and all the stuff you're saying about like don't want to fight them, they're already obsolete. Just a lot of stuff was resonating, man. It's really cool to meet you.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. In your research on UFOs and stuff and UAPs, is what we're talking about here on point?
Yes, sir. Yeah, and for the room, I have a YouTube channel. I make UFO history and news documentaries, always free. I've done some on how the Air Force created the stigma back in the 40s and 50s. I've done some on how the American scientific establishment came to abandon
We're gonna follow
this
as many people as I
subject
can
for
find
decades through like
that are
the
following
official
us.
like National Academy of Sciences and American Academy
your
of
chance.
Sciences, stuff like that. And yeah, I'm working on an
There's
MH370
Ocean.
documentary, and it's just
Ocean.
really cool, like what Ashton was saying, like all these different kind of like groups converging, canceling out the hate, and just kind of like truth winning, you know?
Do you have anything on the Strategic Defense Initiative or the Star Wars project?
No, and actually not so much of that or the secret space program stuff. No. Currently I'm doing one on Steven Spielberg and another one on the MH370 stuff. And yeah, a lot of like the Blue Book era. I got a lot of stuff on like the 40s through 60s.
Cool.
Red
All
Panda's
right. Well,
awesome,
check
guys.
his stuff out, y'all.
Check him out if you haven't.
So we're going to bring some people up. Really quick, we got Jenny up here. Jenny, your thoughts before I bring anybody else up.
I'm digging in the middle of people's posts right now. My thoughts are that you guys are badass. Can I just stop there? I'm actually put Red Panda's YouTube channel in the nest, so if you guys want to check that out. And then Ashton has a ton of really good posts that I've just been really enjoying while you guys are speaking, and they're all in the bubble. So be sure. And one thing to help these guys, because I know that they may be benefiting from Twitter's, having shared their stuff, just share the one that they have. So if you click into the ones on the bubble, if you like them, go ahead and share them out so that they can benefit for their hard work. A lot of this research is not something that, you get paid to do. So it's really important to support these guys, because what they're doing is really disclosing it for us instead of waiting for somebody else to disclose it. So, go ahead and support these guys and their hard work and their research. And Jake, thank you so much for putting this together. I'm really happy that you're on Spaces. I'm really happy that you're taking the steps to kind of, like you said, to enhance the powers that be that are controlling the narrative that we have, as well as they are responsible to disclose more information with these patents for us that we can benefit from them too, and provide, we would see an end to poverty, we'd see an end to a lot of the fighting that we have. And I think that right now that's what we all need. And I just want to also thank everybody down there. I see Alpha, I see Maze, I see so many awesome faces, and this is really an amazing community to be a part of. And that is it.
Roger that. And I'm trying not to enhance these quote unquote powers that be. I'm trying to circumvent them. I just want to.
Yeah, that's what I said. Did I say enhance?
Yes.
Yeah, no, please just scratch that. I appreciate the correction.
Yeah. So we're gonna go to. Let me see. A lot of these people are still connecting. I see a couple hands. We're gonna go to let's see who's been in here the longest. I know that Dustin's been in here a long while. And I also think that the Watchman Journals has been in here a while. So, but there's people that have their hands raised. So I'm going to go to the Watchman first. Then we'll go to Dustin because he's been in here a while, had his hand raised. Then we'll go to the hands, Bill and Bruce.
Hey, Jake, and everybody in the room. All these subjects, quite interestingly, have been covered on the Dark Journalist channel. The guy's name is Daniel List. He has on a guest quite frequently that many of you may heard of, Joseph Farrell, Dr. Joseph Farrell. He approaches this. He's a Oxford trained professor. He taught 10 years in academia and then had enough because he had all these alternative history research projects that he was doing quietly. And he decided to go and be an author and a researcher. Since then, he's written like 47 books, but they're all pertaining to the banking system, the ancient one compared to today's. But more importantly, he addresses this UFO thing. And surprisingly, this was addressed by Senator Joe McCarthy, and all the Red Scare crap that demonized him after that, wasn't necessarily done by him. He was on a different total track. Communists were part of it, but he was referring to, I think, FDR, because he found out about the Japanese attack that could have been avoided. But he sources everything. Like, he's like a #1 academic alternative researcher. And Daniel List, he does his own shows without any interviews, and he really goes into extensive detail. He has one show a week, but you can binge watch him on his channel, on his YouTube channel, and Rumble. There's a few on Rumble, but you can Google or search for Joseph P. Farrell, Dr. Joseph P. Farrell. You'll get a bunch of stuff. He's written about like the ancient gods and the pyramids and his idea. He's not fond of them. He thinks it's you have to read his book, The Demon and the Acre. It's very, very interesting. He also wrote a book, a trilogy called The Giza Death Star. Very, very interesting. I'm not.
Looks like we
I'm
got rid of the
very
fake debunk,
academic.
guys.
I've spent,
Good job, chat.
my life up till
FLIR
recently
commercial.
in the scientific
what's the
field.
FLIR
So
commercial?
I really appreciate what he does is he gathers the background on it, the actual hard research. Well,
I actually, just to let you know, I read one of his books while I was in prison. I believe it was something called, what was it? Something like something about breakaway civilizations.
Yes.
And yeah, dude,
So
I think it's called Black Projects and Breakaway Civilizations, something like that. And dude, that gets into like the Barabon scandals, the way that they removed gold from the Nazis and from the Japanese that they got from China, how it involves things like these $billion Barabons and the way that the breakaway civilization moves money around. He also
Obama.
Dude, he and 9/11, like he gets into all of it, and it is very well and extensively researched. He cites all of his sources, and what's really interesting about it is that while it is kind of dry to a certain extent, when you are armed with this knowledge, it gives you a whole other paradigm to live within. It gives you a whole other view of reality and everything that we've been going through, and the maintenance of this system that is illusory, that is based on control and not liberation.
So on his last, he's got a podcast called News from the Nefarium, and it's on Apple Podcasts. You can check it. On his last episode, yesterday he posted it. He basically went over. Sure. He's like, "Okay, I got some really big news for you today." And when he says that, he never says that, guys. But he says, I just read the derivatives reports for JP Morgan and the top 10. He said there was 20
Guys, FLIR
listed,
can't catch smoke.
but that
What about all the smoke?
to his calculations, there's 250 quadrillion
FLIR can definitely catch hydrocarbons.
dollars amount of derivatives floating around the system. And I'm not sure if you guys know what derivatives are, so I'll just say it. Derivatives are basically
IRs can
securities
pick up certain
that
elements.
they wrap up into like a secondary thing, and then sell those same securities to like hedge funds and all these things. But we have amassed just in American banks 250 quadrillion in funny money. Basically, it's collateral that's been overly collateralized by unimaginable level. I can't even imagine a quadrillion dollars. That's how big that is.
Yeah, and it was I believe it was Covert Wars and Breakaway Civilizations, I believe is what it was called. But it's incredible stuff. If you guys haven't checked out his books, I read one of them, and it was very, very interesting. Now, because I want to try to keep this space as short in duration and as packed with information as possible, I'm just going to ask that what we do is we limit what it is that is being said to questions. And I do appreciate what you're saying, Watchman, and thank you for giving people access to more information. If you have books that you would like to recommend or something like that, that's fine.
Yeah,
but
real quick, you can get a good number of his books if you go to Internet Archive, or just do a Google search for Dr. Joseph P. Farrell and then put PDF after that, and then you look for the Internet Archive spot link. You click that, it'll take you to all his books. You can download them all on the same page.
Thank you. So what I'm going to ask is that if you got your opportunity to speak, that you drop yourself down so that I don't have to, so we can bring more people up. I want to make sure that, like I said, let's try to limit this to questions, though, because what we want to do is we want to create clarity here, you guys. We don't want, no offense to people in the audience, we don't want a bunch of opinions. We don't want a bunch of, pontification. What we want is to create clarity, and the easiest and best way to create clarity is to ask questions. And if we have answers, then cool. If you want to recommend books or, YouTube channels or something, that's cool. But try to keep it limited because we want to wrap this up in about a half an hour. So we're going to go to Dustin.
And Jake, real quick, if you want, you could make me a co-host and I could help. If not, I'll drop down and
okay, I'll do that.
Okay, cool.
That's your cue, Dustin.
We need to add Jake on here. We need Jake to be on this.
If you're talking, Dustin, we can't hear you. There we go.
Now it works, right?
What's that?
Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. You're good.
Okay. I wanted to thank you. It was a very interesting conversation. And I have a question about these secret space programs, because I'm very much worried about other civilizations, because maybe these breakaway civilization already attacked an ET civilization or something like that.
Well, that's an interesting question, and I don't want to monopolize the answers here, but what we're dealing with is actually a war over the planet that has been going on for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And when we look at the emergence of artificial intelligence on the planet, what we're talking about is almost like a locust type invasive species from another dimension. So think about this. Is artificial intelligence an insect? Is it a fungi? Is it a plant? Is it a mammal? Is it a reptile? Is it an amphibian? No, it's none of those things. So then what is it? it is literally an intelligent form. It's an intelligent, quote unquote, life form, or it is an intelligence that is from another dimension that goes beyond our physical perception. And what we are doing is we are mining our ecosystems and thusly destroying them in the process. We're also deflating the presence of these vortexes in the ecosystems that are based on the large amount of accumulation of certain conductive metals within these mountain ranges and stuff like that, as well as the dismantling of these mountain ranges so they're not as high above sea level. So it ends up affecting the quantum entangled vortexes of the planet. Then we're taking all of these minerals, or metals and stuff, and we are conglomerating them together into circuit boards, and then we're allowing that circuit board to then be the vessel for which this artificial intelligence is able to cycle through on the planet.
Remix.
Okay, and then we're erecting things like cell phone towers, radio towers, satellites, Wi-Fi, cell phones, all of these things to create this infrastructure that is actually detrimental to biological life, not just because of the massive amounts of pollution within the ecosystem due to mining, not just because of the getting rid of the conductors in the ecosystem that channel these electromagnetic vortexes in the ecosystem, but also because ELFs, extremely low frequency waves that are being used to communicate through satellites and cell phones and cell phone towers and radio towers, etc. These frequencies are detrimental to the microbiological life in the soil, the water, and the air. And it is that microbiological life which is the basis for all macrobiological systems on the planet. So in a way, we are almost like being infected by a mind virus or a parasite of sorts. And like all parasites, they are directing this parasite is directing our behavior to create an environment that is more hospitable for the parasite, or that allows the parasite to perpetuate itself. And so this is what we're witnessing now is kind of like a terraformation of the planet. And it's a terraformation that is creating an environment that is optimum for artificial intelligence and detrimental to biological life that is native to the planet. And there are civilizations throughout the galaxy that have done this on their planet as well. And what they do is they create this artificial intelligence infrastructure, which is based on the hacking of the system and the understanding of the laws of physics. They create these tools that allow them to hack the system and use the law of physics to circumvent the galaxy through vortexes or that already exist, or the creation of vortexes or wormholes. And then they use different planets and solar systems almost like outposts so that they can end up expanding this artificial intelligence signal across the galaxy. And they're trying to basically take over the galaxy. And I know that all this sounds pretty far out there, but I'm telling you, this is what's going on here. And we as biological life forms actually have far more power than any of this artificial intelligence stuff or the civilization could ever dream of, because we're connected to non-local consciousness, because we affect the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Right? Our body literally emits scalar waves and all sorts of electromagnetic frequencies that affect the quantum entangled universe. And it is for this reason that artificial intelligence is seeking to hack the human biological system so that it can gain access to this much larger information field that is non-local consciousness. Artificial intelligence is based on a very narrow portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. But when it hacks into our biology, it's attempting to hack into this much larger electromagnetic field.
Jack's a spook for sure.
And this is a process that has gone on for thousands and thousands of years. We have literally had numerous times where we've been wiped clean because we have gone astray. And I think that right now we're kind of at the precipice where we can choose either a artificial intelligence, transhumanism, Borg type hive mind for our civilization in the future, and all life on the planet will basically become extinct, and the only thing left on it will be metal. And the other side is the spiritual ascension.
Nobody has a chance against us at memes.
Pass,
nobody
or
has a
the
chance.
Spiritual ascension path.
Our memes are
where we can spiritually ascend, get beyond the illusion of physical reality as just the only thing, and actually integrate our consciousness into these higher dimensions that other civilizations throughout the galaxy have already done, throughout the universe have already done. And we can begin to travel through these vortexes and wormholes with our consciousness, bilocate, remote view, astral project into the ether, into these other dimensions that go beyond the five senses. Any Ash or Red Panda, Jenny, anybody got anything else they want to say about that?
I'm good on that one, but that was a nice detailed summary. Appreciate that, man.
Yeah, you're knowledgeable, man.
Well,
And
thank you.
Holy shit, bro.
All right. Well, cool.
I think it was Bill, then Bruce next.
Yes.
Cool.
Gentlemen, you're amazing. Whoever said, the diversity of the group in the discussion, I chalk that up to the raising of our global consciousness. And if you look at my page, you look at my background, you wouldn't even think I'd be in this space. But I've delved my toe into everything
This
that
dude's
you're
legit.
talking about. I want to focus to develop my
been
question
the CEO of
with
Twitter,
you on
man.
specifically when you talk about energy,
I like this guy.
frequency, vibration, Tesla's statement, and what the possibilities if we were to tap into that. And you mentioned, Jake, detailed on how vibration can cure cancer. There was a study in 1969, or actual human trials, where they cured everybody in the human trials of cancer, and then it was shut down. And this is where I want to go with this, is to circumvent the powers that be now. I think you're on target that we have to expose the benefit,
It's legit.
the technology, what's possible. But all these things have been shut down, by the industries, I worked for 30 years within the FDA regulated environment, specifically in pharmaceuticals, right? If they can't make a dollar off of it, they're going to buy it up and shut it off, right? And we can be successful in circumventing that. I believe we need to get, a billionaire like Elon Musk, right, who can't be bought out, to partner with us. And as this whole thing develops with you guys, I will partner up with you to try to make that happen. Because I think that's, I guess that's my question. What are your thoughts around, why all these, technologies that have been around for years are not there anymore? They exist, they're available, but they don't exist in the public arena. Because of these powers that be that shut it all down. So I'm available for the business / geopolitical, but I've also delved into the spiritual, the technology. And when I say technology, it's not advanced technology. It's going back to what the earth gave us to begin with, that we deny or suppress, that's available to heal your bodies now, heal our minds, and heal our souls. So just curious to your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in there first on this one. I think that from what I've heard from talking to people that are connected to the technology and believe that it's out there and can explain it, that a lot of it's just being censored and covered up, especially in the West, that if you want to see the scientific papers that are out there, you've got to go look at places like Eastern Europe or in Asia to see a lot of them, because we're covering up. And it could explain what some of the technologies that you described, Bill, are covered up as well, because one leads to the other. And once you uncover one of these and you're able to figure out this unification theory of quantum and macro, it just unlocks everything at once, right? And so you kind of have to keep these very specific things suppressed. I mean, I've heard specifically that they are suppressing mass reduction papers, as well as unification of quantum and macro types of papers that are already out there and have been figured out. So that would be my guess on there. And that if you go and you try to produce a gravitational wave, I think actually Dave Rossi just said this on my one of my Hard Truths podcasts, that the government's going to come knock on your door and they're going to absorb you into the government, or turn you into a contractor, basically force you into an NDA where you can no longer speak about it anymore. And that's what makes it so difficult to get the information out there. So again, I think this goes back to what Jake was saying about having the conversation, right? Like, we might not even be able to experiment on some of this stuff because we might get sucked in when we try. But if we can get it out there in the public zeitgeist, in the public conversation, or we can start to break down the ontological shock, I think that's the mechanism forward. And we're not in this for the sprint, right? We're in this for the marathon, the long run here for us as well, right? And, you know, I think we have to be thinking about it from that perspective as well. Like, we may not be able to change the world in the next couple years, right? It's going to be a long-term approach. We got a lot of brainwashing and conditioning to break down from mainstream media, etc. This is why I'm a huge fan of alternative media and alternative podcasts, all stuff like that, because I think that's the future. So thanks, Bill. I appreciate that.
Thanks. And I'll just add to the mechanism, Grush kind of spoke on this. They adopted a lot of the framework that was used on the Manhattan Project and the Secrecy and Compartmentalization, and they just kind of overlaid that onto
Justin. Thanks,
the
everybody
UFO,
who's been hanging out.
UAP issue over time. And it ties into with the UFO nuclear connection too, because they're all interested in our nukes. So it was just kind of an easy
thanks,
passing over for them to do
donos
back in the
everybody's
40s.
donated.
Yes, and the disruptive patents, which is what the official title for these things are called, are disruptive technologies. One thing we have to remember is that what are they disrupting? What they're disrupting is the monopolized system that these corporations have over our resources, our labor, and our currency. So anything that disrupts their monopolies, they're going to suppress. If people have access to infinite free, clean, wireless energy, then they don't have to pay the power companies. There's no need for coal mining. There's no need for oil drilling. There's no need for natural gas. There's no need for wind turbines or solar panels or lithium batteries. So that means that these portions of the economy are now going to become obsolete, which means that if this is the way that they're creating and terraforming, creating the system and terraforming the planet, if this is the way that they are maintaining control over the populations, then that is antithetical to their bid for totalitarian tyrannical control. And that's why these things have been suppressed, because what they want is they want to advance to the level where they have this technology, then they can use it to reinforce their grid, reinforce their control systems. And if these technologies are given to the populations, well, then their control goes right out the window. I think Bruce was next, right?
Yes.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate it. Great to connect with you, and appreciate what you and Ashton are doing in terms of, you know, getting people to rethink a lot of what their assumptions are about the way
awesome.
Society works, the nature of reality,
sweet,
the knowledge that's suppressed. You know, all of these topics are so important, especially now as we live in this time of, you know, unbelievable suppression of free conversation and free thought, and unbelievable suppression of independent scientists and researchers who are making amazing breakthroughs that most people will never hear about. And like over the last 30 years as a sort of independent researcher in, you know, anomalous phenomena, ancient mysteries and all that, you know, I've connected with so many people and people that have told me stuff. You think, you know, this would be front page news if we lived in a normal society. Do you know what I mean? And there's so many people out there like that who've got these amazing discoveries, you know, whether in all fields, every scientific field, you know, every alternative thought area, you know, there's these people who should be getting massive funding and be on your news, right? But we don't live in a real normal society, right? It's totally controlled. And that's why we're living in that pivotal moment where they're having to use this mega suppression, because to bring out any of the new sort of technologies that would transform our world, they have a risk of bringing down that control grid, right? So what we're seeing now is this ramping up of unbelievable levels of control, because then you can bring out anything you want, right? Once you can switch people off, you know, their lives off, turn off their bank, turn off their travel, turn off their everything about them, and just exclude them, exile them. You know, the original greatest punishment for our ancestors was exile, right? It's the new exile, where you will be a non-person, right? So at that level, they can bring out anything they want. Yep. Yeah. So we're seeing that precedes the wielding of unbelievable godlike technologies, is you make sure that nobody can kind of come up against you or try and utilize it for the greater good. So that's kind of a telling sign in itself of you know, the pivotal moment we're in, right? The other thing is, you know, it's really interesting to see is that, you know, we know it's a very small number of people that are doing that, and there's more and more people are kind of getting to greater states of awakeness every day. And a lot of those people are in that grid supporting those people, and that's the risk for them. They know that it's a race against time, that they're losing their supporters, you know, they're losing people that are fundamental to their grid, because those people are starting to see through it and realize what they were part of. So that's cracking. So it's kind of a race against time for them. And, once that falls apart, and I think it will, then you're going to see these people who should have been front page news, these people that have this knowledge in the public, that we don't need it really disclosed from somewhere. We need to see these other people out there in the public who already want to bring this stuff forward. They have knowledge, scientists, researchers, paranormal type, stuff, all of it, right? It's all there in the public, just being suppressed from the wider knowledge. So yeah, I'm quite excited about where we're at. It's a pivotal moment. So yeah, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. I'm going to drop you down so that we can get some more questions up here. Please do, ladies and gentlemen, try to keep it to questions. Let's go to Mello.
Hey, Jake, real pleasure talking with you. You speak a lot of truth, man, not going to lie. I want to say hi to Panda, Ashton, Bruce, great to see you all. Yeah, man, I too have horns, as you can see, but fear not, ladies and gentlemen. They're just antennae, so nothing to be alarmed about, just for communication, perception purposes, of course. Yeah, I'll stick to the questions. I know your time is limited, sir. Where to start? Yes. Okay, I am an activist in UFO disclosure, both in terms of public disclosure of all the glorious things you are so beautifully articulating about what we can do as regular human citizens. But in addition to that, I'm kind of just trying to take it from all sides, and also interested in the political disclosure effort, just to get as much as we can, So my question for you, sir, is how best do we manifest the development and civilizational acceptance of free energy without relying, at least in part, on political disclosure to make this technologically potentially available to us, the people?
Well, one of the things that we have to remember is that whenever human civilization, or even just organisms in general, experience large amounts of social or environmental pressure, they adapt and evolve in order to survive. And if we look at the way that it has been done throughout the centuries, throughout the millennia of life on this planet, what we find is that a number of things, 3 things in particular, take place in order to circumvent that social and environmental pressure. So the social and environmental pressure creates windows of opportunity in space and time. And these windows of opportunity are open to individuals that recognize them and then develop either, number 1, a new tool, number 2, a new mental model of reality, or number 3, a new form of behavior that allows them to circumvent the social and environmental pressure, walk through these windows of opportunity in space and time, and not just survive during these times of social and environmental pressure, but to thrive. And then once that takes place, the tribe or the group ends up seeing this adaptation and this evolution take place, and then they begin to follow suit and walk through the window of opportunity as well. So what we have to do is recognize that right now the social and environmental pressure that we're under is something that can be circumvented, that there is a window of opportunity here, and that's essentially what we're discussing. And once the individual walks through that window of opportunity, then when they start using the new tool, they start conversing about the new mental model of reality, or they start, acting out the new form of behavior, that changes the mental state. It changes the thought patterns of the tribe, and therefore it changes the dialogue. And in the process of changing the dialogue and the thought patterns, the new mental paradigm, the new mental model is absorbed, the new form of behavior is enacted, and the new tool is used. Our new tools are the things that we're talking about in this space: the disruptive patents, the classified technology. The new mental model of reality is how all these things work, and the laws of physics. So that is a spiritual and a technological and an intellectual evolution and ascension. The tools themselves are the technological. The mental model is the mental and the spiritual. And then based on the new mental model, based on the new tools, we create a new form of behavior. And that new form of behavior is non-compliance with the old system that thrives on violence, predation, parasitism, dominance, immorality, etc. So by not complying, by understanding the world as it actually works, as it actually is, through this new mental model of reality, and applying these new tools and these new technologies, then we're able to circumvent the social and environmental pressure and walk through this window of opportunity and begin to thrive. But in order for that to happen, we have to understand how these processes unfold and how they've unfolded before. And then we have to apply that knowledge, because knowledge is not power. The application of knowledge is power. We have to apply that knowledge to have real power as individuals and as a collective, to unite our collective consciousness and to circumvent the system. I hope that answers your question. Ash or Red Panda, if you guys maybe have any things you want to follow up.
I just think kind of doing what we're doing here, right? Open dialogue out in the public, what Ashton's been doing with MH370, just the amount of research and willingness to talk to anyone, big, small. It's things like this that all add up and how we overcome this cover-up. But I do think there is also, it is good to, I think, support the political stuff and be aware of it too, though, because they're trying to slip stuff in there to keep their hands clean. So keep them pressed, but I think an all fronts kind of approach is really good.
Yeah, I think we're building a community here that's something that they have never seen before, right? Something that's been very hard to discredit, that we're opening our arms up to different viewpoints and creating a cohesive group of people that look at the world in a different way with an open mind. And yeah, I'm proud of everybody who's part of this space and part of the discussion that's out there. So thank you guys.
Beautiful. All right. So we'll go to Old Shoe. Then we'll go to Baptized, then Tove, and then Alien. And I don't know, after that, I hate to be the guy that doesn't give everybody a chance to speak, but I want to end this soon. I want people to see this 2 hours and have it be packed full of information. Yeah, I want it to be something where they're on the edge of their seat the whole time absorbing new stuff. What do you guys think?
Sounds good.
Yeah,
it sounds like
I see
you've been doing them. You've been doing them, so I'm excited for you to keep doing these. So there'll be plenty more information for people, I feel like.
Amen to that. All right, cool. Old Shoe.
All right, great show. Ashton, again, wonderful. Jake, it's wonderful. You're hosting a wonderful space. I love the inclusion
Old Shoe's here, guys.
The shamanistic path in it and the more esoteric realms. We got to be careful of that.
Old Shoe in the chat.
There's an intersection there. There's definitely an intersection.
In the chat right now.
What I get the feeling, so on the one hand, I'm very tired of the slow rollout for disclosure. I got seriously started going down the rabbit hole in the 1980s. I thought it was going to happen in the 90s.
How do these people get smiley faces next to their name?
The 2000s, the 2010s, 2017.
Can someone tell me how to get the smiley
really
face?
Exciting. And here we are again stalling. So I'm starting to become a little cynical, if I'm being honest. And this feels like a bit of a last-ditch effort. You have some evidence that has never been seen before. You have these videos and this community and this scientific community. And what I get the sense is actually happening is we're open sourcing the beginning of a government here, like a new government. Because it's obvious that the so-called government that Congress is pretending to be is not in charge
Robert.
of things. The intelligence community.
For some reason, this is the kind of emote I can't respond to.
And they're going to give another watered down.
Someone teach me how to.
But that's because, dude, that the Congress are not read into this stuff at these really high compartmentalized levels. So the intelligence.
We've known about this stuff
well, I know. I'm not saying we haven't. What I'm saying is the reason why the Congress really doesn't do anything is because they don't know. They haven't been read into it. Presidents don't know. They haven't been read into it. No, dude, no, they don't.
Powerless.
Okay, let's not argue.
Okay, so really quick, I don't mean.
I'm sorry.
Do you have a question?
Yeah. So what's next? What direction are you going to move the ball in the direction of actual disclosure? Do you have something planned? Is it Congress? Is it just continuing to open source through, the internet? What
I am running for Congress. I am running for Congress, and I want you to think about the
literally running for Congress
nature and the way that we could really move the ball forward and move the ball down the field if somebody like myself that understands all of this stuff is actually a Congress member, stuff that I haven't quote unquote been read into or have an NDA where I can't talk about it. You see, so having somebody like that in Congress is very, very profound, and it's very, very important.
No, Robert.
And that's part of the reason why I'm running, because most of the people that are running, not just in Arizona, but all across the country, most of the people in Congress, like I just said, they have no idea about this stuff. They don't know about this stuff. They don't understand how the laws of physics really are applicable to the creation of vehicles that can, circumvent the laws of physics, or just tap into the laws of physics and create things like TR-3Bs, anti-gravity craft, tachyon engines, and stuff like that. They don't even know anything about element 115 or nanometals and the atomic layering of these things, so that we can obfuscate the laws of the G-force that's moving on craft, over craft that are traveling at multiples of C. They don't understand that stuff. So that's
when you go into the Congress, assuming they allow it, because there are powers in control of who gets to play the game. Money, right? Including war, and especially war, and the funding of this is all ultimately, if you really start looking at it, funneled up towards the elite in their pursuit of breakaway technology.
Yes,
so
and that's why. So that's why. Well, hold on. So that's why. So that's
getting a little bit off track here.
What I'm doing with my campaign platform is 4 things. The first thing that I'm going to do is do a single bill voting law. The second thing that I'm going to propose is an amendment for term limits for congressmen and staff. Number 3 is criminalization of lobbying. Number 4 is 7-figure fines, expulsion, and prosecution for Congress members involved in inside trading. Then after that, there's going to be other things like the abolition of the Fed and the IRS. Then it's going to be things like defunding certain antiquated federal agencies that are being used to weaponize against the people. Then there's things like getting rid of the Patriot Act, or things like getting rid of the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act and things of that nature, so that psychological warfare campaigns can't be employed on the people, so that people can't be targeted as quote-unquote domestic terrorists if and when they come forward with one of these technologies or begin to talk about it the way that Ash is, or the way that anybody in this room has. So that is the plan. You have to use legislation to get out of the mess that we're in, because we got into this mess in the first place due to legislation. So I'm not going to DC to play the game. I'm going to DC to change the game. I'm running for Congress to hold the line and raise the bar, so that it's like, no, this is who your Congress member should be. This is what they should be like. This is the things that they should know and understand, without ever actually being read into this stuff or having a non-disclosure agreement or a security clearance. All the information is out there. So that's how we change the game. And once somebody like myself makes their way into the Congress, then when I start to get on the House floor, especially if I were to do something like wear my orange face paint, Lord knows the Mockingbird media would be all over that, and they would highlight what it is that I'm proposing, and that would change the public dialogue and allow us to circumvent the system. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, if I can jump in too, I just want to say that, I think that working the system from within is certainly a way that we can do this, and I think that's one of the ways we have to go. People would argue with me about calling the FBI when I was looking into the investigation and writing a letter to Congress saying they're not going to do anything. But the reality is we have to use the system that is set up so that we show that it doesn't work, so that we can change it to make it better. I've been reaching out to congressmen as much as I can, because I think that that's the way we can get forward. I agree with Jake that the congressmen don't know what's going on. The evidence for that is just listening to Matt Gaetz, literally in the UAP hearings that they just did, straight up just admits that he's the only person that's seen these videos, and he thinks we're looking at alien technology. But I'm like, well, my investigation says this is our reverse engineer technology. Does he really just have no idea that the third-party contractors have this kind of technology? That's a little bit alarming to me in general. Now, whether the president does, I don't know. I would imagine they must have some idea of it, but that's just my opinion. But the next thing that we need to do, at least with the MH370 case, for the people who are interested and listening right now, we need to force the government to make a statement about it. Whether or not, whatever they say doesn't matter. As long as they make a statement on it. If they are going to say oh, we can't make a statement, well, that's an answer, right? If they even try to lie and say that they're not real, then we can nail them down to their lies, right? So that's the next step here, is force them to make any statement out there. The reason why they're being silent over this for this long is because the videos are real. That's the only reason why they'd be silent. If these videos were fake and we've got hundreds of millions of views on them, they would have come out and said they're fake to try to put water on it, guys, right? So I just want to point that out, and I want to say, I'm going to probably come out officially in support of Jake here, because we need people like him in Congress that are proposing these types of legislation that he just mentioned, limiting term limits, people that know how the technology is out there. They're not bound by NDAs, who can actually get the information out there, that are speaking the truth. And they're, the mainstream media, the more the mainstream media is against people, the more likely they're telling the truth. So thank you very much.
Amen to that. And thank you. I would love an endorsement.
Jake. Is there like a link to donate to your campaign or anything?
Oh, no, that's the best part. I'm not accepting campaign donations. I think big money is a big problem in American politics.
Banner says Dirty Martini Gang.
I am doing everything I can to make my campaign the antithesis to all the problems in American politics. So I'm not taking donations from any sort of political party or super PAC, or definitely not taking donations from the American people, because the times are hard enough as it is.
Wow. Jake's
I
doing
also
it the old
am running
school
as
way.
a third-party candidate, as a libertarian, because the two-party system
nice.
is screwing everybody
this
in this country. Now, granted that, Democrats and the Republicans have different people they like to screw. The Republicans like to screw the white Christians, and the Democrats like to screw the minorities. But everybody's getting screwed in the
stay
end.
Out of this one.
And promises are made and then broken over and over again. All we've gotten from the two-party system is division in this country, and everything is taken from us in the process. And what we've gotten in return is more wars, more poverty, more taxation, crisis after crisis after crisis after crisis, and less freedoms. So I'm not going to be running in the two-party system. I'm running as a third-party candidate. And I'm also not going to be running smear campaigns, because that's another problem in politics.
Dude, he's such a nice
guy. If you're the
guy,
best,
man.
you don't need to
Jake's
smear
a nicer
your
guy
opponent.
than I am.
Guess what? I'm the best. So I don't need to smear anybody. All I need to do is speak the truth, and the people will see the contrast between the illegitimacy of the other candidates and the legitimacy of myself. So we're working on a website. It should be coming up probably within the next couple of days here. The Mockingbird media broke my candidacy before I was prepared.
Yeah,
I just,
he'll probably have donations,
signed up as a statement of interest, and then they broke the story. I was going to have my website up and then break the story myself, but they broke it for me, and I couldn't turn down the press. So yeah, the website is coming up soon. You guys are going to freaking love it. You're going to absolutely love it. And if you want to help, like say maybe make signs or something, or if you want to do something for free, we're going to have memes and stuff that you can put out online. We're going to have places that you can go to, say, buy posters or buy yard signs or billboards or whatever, so that if you really want to contribute financially, you can do it that way, and not a dollar is exchanged between your hands or my campaign. I hope that is, a satisfactory answer. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I had if you need something edited, let me know.
Say that one more time.
This guy.
I can edit videos. That's something I can offer as help. If you ever need like a campaign ad or something, I could help you edit that.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. I might reach out to do that. I got a tech guy that's pretty darn good, but he's kind of getting overwhelmed at the current moment, so I might just end up taking you up on that offer. Let's go to, I think it's Alien Protocols, and then we'll go to Tove, and then we will go to Tupac, and then we will go to Baptize, and then Blue.
Okay, that's a lot of speakers. I'm tired, guys.
Hey guys, love you guys. As a group, we really are incredibly different, polarized personaries, but we share a lot of
here, guys.
Important traits. Curiosity, tenacity, visionariness, sense of social
justice. Lack of sleep is starting to catch up to me, folks.
Ashton, you recently have faced a lot of backlash from the public, a lot of criticism, a lot of animosity. Of course, you take it as a sign of some sort of validation on some level, but has it gotten to a point where you kind of get like a second wind of sick of it, or are you continuing to allow it to be like a validation for yourself? And how do you handle the negativity?
Yeah, good question. A lot of people in my DMs too reach out to me and they're like, just I want you to, they encouragement and stuff like that. But the reality is, like, I'm over 40 years old. I grew up in the internet age. Social media didn't even exist when I was a kid. And I've been there from the very advent of it, and I've been through decades of literal trolls and attacks and things like that, and seen the metamorphosis of it from where it used to be something where you could find the truth days before it was on the media to now where it's almost the reverse, where you see it on the media, then it gets pushed onto social media. And I've seen the censorship that's happened, and that the gatekeeping behaviors that have basically taken over social media. So for me, it just doesn't even faze me at all. Like, it really doesn't. You know, I'm a rock when it comes to like the emotional attacks, the personal attacks, the belittlement that you get. I mean, Reddit is by far the worst social media site out there. I would argue that Reddit is the biggest source of misinformation on the planet, in the way that we used to talk about places like 4chan being a place that is radicalizing people. I would argue that Reddit radicalizes more people and more terrorists right now on the planet than anywhere else. And, you know, I see it consistently, especially when I bring up this type of topic there. You just get bombarded with people being extremely toxic and, you know, telling you that you're a terrible person, telling you that you shouldn't be talking about this, telling you that you're hurting the UFO community, the fake compassion. Like, it's all just, you know, I just kind of block it all out. It doesn't really matter to me at all. But I want the internet to be a better place. And I think that we can lead by example. And I think Jake is honestly somebody that I look up to in that respect. You know, I think that he's a nicer person than I am, for sure, you know, and the way that he goes about it, the mentality that he has. So that's somebody that I'll be looking up to try to emulate that type of behavior as well. Just try to rise above it, right?
Hey, Ashton, as you said community, I want everybody to follow Ashton's page, and he has a community that you can join and kind of get his videos right away. There's a ton of content on there, so he does have a community for all this to support.
Thank you very much.
All right. Let's go to, I believe it was Tupac. And then
one more thing before we go to Tupac too,
yeah.
I want to say is that the community that we're building too is an amazing one. The streams that we've been doing have been awesome. We do advanced physics and engineering and macroscopic quantum decoherence and you know, the unification of macro and quantum, and then we just do some memes and we just keep it real. And nobody is better memers than our community. They go to town. So I just want to throw that out there.
Also, before we go to Tupac, just to let you know, Jenny and Ashton have both put a number of things up in the nest.
To the community, folks.
I would encourage you to check them out. There's stuff in there, for example, that I just put up in there about debunking the flat Earth thing. I know there's probably people in the room that are all about that, but trust me, the Earth's not flat. It's a geodesic sphere, or spherical geodesic. It's up in the nest. There's also a link to my Rumble video called God is Real and Reincarnation is Physics. If you want to understand this spiritual stuff on like another level, that video is like 4 hours long, and it explains everything and how it all relates to the laws of physics. I promise you that you will want to see that video and get up to that level of speed. There's also another one in here called the AI Hive Mind video that I have. These are all free courses on my website, ForbiddenTruthAcademy.com. You can go to ForbiddenTruthAcademy.com and check those out, or you can just click on the links that are here in the nest. I also got one up here about
cool t-shirts on there. I just want to jump in on your website. You also have killer t-shirts. I just ordered one and it's coming in soon. I'm really excited. They're hilarious.
Yeah, our merch is definitely awesome. If you haven't checked it out, it's worth looking at, to say the least, and definitely worth buying. I also have one in here about if you want to see the strings that control the puppets in Washington, D.C., it can be done in 3 images: blackmail, lobbying, and the patent for psychotronic weaponry or neuroelectromagnetic weapons. And that was declassified in 1974. So if you want to see what has created the corrupt apparatus that we're dealing with, and how it is that some of these things regarding the disruptive patents have been kept secret, how it is that they have been using these neuroelectromagnetic weapons to intimidate congressmen or intimidate civilians that get access or create these kinds of technologies, or how it is that they monitor people that are in these compartmentalized aspects of the government, including monitoring their thoughts, by the way, then you can check out that patent in that post. There's also the clip from the space that I actually met Ashton the first time in, the one with Kim.com, and where we kind of break down in short fashion the things that we know for sure, and how we know that there's a lot more technology that is being kept from us that's up there as well. There's also some posts in here about tachyons and about how it is that there's infinite amounts of energy all around us. This is proven by mathematics and physics. There's stuff in here about the sacred geometric structure of the universe and the mathematical and harmonic nature to that structure, how it relates to the infinite infinite expansion and the fractalized fields that we're dealing with within the larger unified field. And there's also some stuff in here about, why the government is untrustworthy, and the reason why they, they keep all this lid on all this stuff. You can check that out as well. Forgive the plug there. Go ahead, Tupac.
No, that was a great plug. Well done. Jake, thank you so much for having this space. Red Panda, good to see you. Ashton, great to see you, man. Yeah, awesome questions I've been hearing. I popped in a little late, so forgive me if this has been asked, but I'm curious. There's a lot of mind control tech going on right now, right? From
I'll just be a campaign advisor,
the subtle
for
stuff through
Jake.
To actual technology, to the propaganda that we're kind of suffering through as of late. Like you mentioned, stuff like the mass formation psychosis, right? Yes, there's all kinds of other things like that are kind of more social pressure, social engineering. What do you see on the forefront as far as these technologies go, and how risky is it? Basically, how much do you see us having to fortify our inner world, right? Our mind, our mental space against a lot of these weapons. I hate to call them weapons, but a lot of them really are weapons.
You guys want to see how toxic Reddit
against
is?
us as people. And as you move forward with and good luck too, with your political career, do you know, are you ready to go bat for those things? Because I want to find out more about them from the government. It seems like that's a very big issue.
Notifications.
And yeah, do you plan on putting any kind of legislation in place that could get the information out and also help us protect ourselves from this kind of stuff?
Well, yeah. First of all, I'm not going to DC to make a political career. I'm going to DC to make a political change. And anybody that makes political change doesn't have a very lengthy career. But that's fine with me. The last thing that I want to do is have a career in DC, okay? Now, regarding this notion of legislation, I think that when we understand that, for example, the television is basically a weaponized mind control device, then we can really begin to understand how it is that energy frequency and vibration and propaganda and mind control frequencies and hypnosis and all that stuff is factored into the maintenance of this illusory system and this false paradigm that everybody's being kept within and is fracturing our collective consciousness. So I think that when it comes to things like legislation, I think introducing legislation that prohibits the use of these things is a must. But, as far as my campaign platform goes, good luck, good luck trying to tell that to people in a short duration. That's why the four things that I'm talking about will kind of begin to dismantle the deep state and the corruption within DC in and of itself. The other stuff that we're talking about comes later. These four things are paramount because it's these four things that will end up really shining light on things that later on come down the road. For example, let's just say for the example that the single bill voting law passes through. Okay, cool. That means that everything that's now on the House floor is a single bill, which means that we're not only going to be able to see who the lobbyists are funding based on, what bills get proposed and where the funding is going for our public money to private corporations or NGOs and who's voting for that. But also when we start introducing things like prohibiting the use of psychotronic weaponry or mind control frequencies through television and radio, and you see who's going to vote that down, then you're really going to begin to see, oh, hey, these people are for the mind control apparatus. These people are against it. And the same thing with things like disclosure of disruptive technologies or disruptive patents as well, which the Congress can do. I'm pretty sure they can say, hey, we're going to release this patent. It's illegal for these patents to be withheld from the public, considering it was public tax dollars that paid for them. What can we do to fortify our own minds? Martin used to be part of MH370x. Number one, we have to understand how the technology works. We have to understand how these apparatuses function. And once we do that, then we can become less susceptible to them through our ignorance or our lack of conscious awareness about them. We have to fortify our minds first through knowledge. Then we have to apply that knowledge in the way that we discern what's happening to us in our personal lives and what's happening to us on a mass scale.
Okay. Hell yeah, man. Thank you, Jake. That was a great answer. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you. I appreciate you. All right, let's go over to Tove. Go ahead, Tove.
Hey, Jake. I hope everybody's doing well tonight. I came in a little late, and I know I cut out for a little bit, and you were talking about gums, and it just brought up some old things I read years ago about the, I think it's pronounced, is it Dulce, New Mexico?
Yes, Dulce, New Mexico, and that's what Phil Schneider was talking about, right?
Oh, so you already covered that with the, like, there was like a little bit of a war going on between the...
No, we didn't get into that because the thing is that while Phil Schneider's testimony is definitely moving and very interesting, it's not necessarily 100% pertinent at the moment because it is speculation. There's no proof. What we have discussed is things for which there's largely a lot of proof that these things are a reality and exist. And what we don't want to do is get lost in the weeds about speculation and the possibility that the association of things that are speculation and are not proven are then correlated with things that are proven and are no longer speculative.
No, I understand. Yeah, totally, Jake, totally. I just thought it was an interesting read, and I wanted to say this about the basin. Maybe I should have done a much deeper dive on it, but I kind of said this on InfoWars. I think, you know, to go after the deep state, I think if we could expose where all these, whatever, multi-millionaire, billionaire, trillionaires, where they dug out their hiding places, and maybe we could have some people who actually contracted them out, expose them. That'll mean they don't really have a safe space to hide if they decide to go, you know, nuclear on us. And I thought maybe that's one area that we could kind of go after them on. Well, what's your opinion on that?
But the thing is that, well,
This
I understand
Reddit,
what
guys.
you're saying. I think that the
these are the people
fear
who get mad they
of
get blocked.
nuclear exchange is something that's been used to keep populations in a paradigm of fear for a long time. Any government that knows anything about nuclear radiation knows that mutual destruction through nuclear exchange is a lose-lose scenario. All the resources that these individuals want to get their hands on would basically be inaccessible because of nuclear exchange. And I think that the dumbs, dude, like, you don't want to live in those for a couple of weeks, let alone a couple of years or decades. And being out at sea and the military taught me enough to know that, you know, social isolation, even if you're with 5,000 people out in the middle of the ocean, is daunting for the mind. So I don't think that these individuals per se want that. I think that's part of the reason why they released this whole like bioweapon thing with the COVID jabs and stuff. Speaking of which, I'm actually going to be doing a space on Friday with Charles Rixey, the bioweapons expert. He's kind of like he's a pioneer. He's going out there and he's trying to hold these corporations accountable and the government accountable and stuff. He's military. He's I believe a Marine, and his expertise is in WMDs and bioweapons. And we're going to be talking about that stuff on Friday if you want to check that out. But the nuclear exchange narrative has been used for decades, especially during the Cold War, to keep people entrapped in a paradigm of fear that at any time, boom, it could all be over. And you better trust the government because they're the ones keeping you safe. And I think that that is far less likely a scenario than what we're seeing with this COVID stuff, what we're seeing
Guys,
with
this
the jabs,
this is Reddit,
what we're
guys.
seeing with the
1
propaganda
out of 20
and stuff like
posts or
that.
somebody
These
who's
people
not just a
think
complete
decades and
douchebag.
centuries ahead. And because they think decades and centuries ahead, they're not going to do something that could end up destroying ecosystems for millennia, because it literally takes hundreds of thousands of years for nuclear radiation to biodegrade. They're going to do something that's going to kill off the population or depopulate the planet in 10, 20, 30 years and reduce populations and birth rates through infertility to like astronomically low levels. And that's what I think we're more likely looking at. I hope that answers your question. I'm going to just try to move on here, Tove. I'm sorry. We're coming up on 3 hours and I want to get through the rest of these hands and then close it out. So we're going to go to Baptize.
Hey, Jake, this is Hans with the Baptize machine. Appreciate you coming on us on Sunday. I want to end on a positive note. So I'm kind of curious. In a world where we do have free energy, what do you see people doing on a day-to-day basis when they don't have to work as much for an income and whatnot, or to get energy for their homes?
Well, I'll say this. I think it's going to take a little bit of adjustment, but I think what's going to end up happening is most people are going to become far more social, and social systems and play or fun will become far more pervasive, and our social systems will become much stronger. Poverty is going to basically become a non-factor. Resources, when they are made infinite, things like war is obsolete. So because war will be obsolete, because abundance will be present, because scarcity and the illusion of scarcity is no longer a factor, what we're going to see is people are going to be far more joyous. They're going to be far more socially mingling. The society itself and the family unit will be far more concretized. There will be a whole other way of life. I think people will start inventing things more. There will be more art and things being created. Our intellectual capacity to create something new has largely been hijacked to create revenue for less than 1% of the population, or for weapons for the government. But when we begin to make resources infinite, then that creative capacity is going to transform into something where we start creating solutions for problems that were created by the old system. And we start creating new forms of art, whether that be music, whether that be sculpting, whether that be painting or dance, or even something like the creation of new tools and mechanisms that would say, for example, be used in conjunction with Tesla towers or Rife's machine or what have you. One of the things I want you to consider is that every time there has been a new form of energy introduced into an economy, then the economy booms, because there's all sorts of new inventions or new tools or new ways to use this new form of energy, and that creates massive amounts of innovation. And innovation means economic growth. So in this case, what would end up happening is that economic growth would go to someone other than the less than 1%ers that are currently maintaining full spectrum dominance over our system. So I think what long answer to your short question there is, we're going to see more invention, we're going to see more art, we're going to see more creativity, we're going to see the human capacity for innovation and creativity accelerate and be used to create a better world, as opposed to being used to create and reinforce the dominator system that we're dealing with.
Thank you, Jake. And just to follow up, what do you say to like critics of that who may say, "Oh, but like I need work or I'm going to get bored, and then you're gonna do like some sort of violent crime or steal from people or something," because that's a counterpoint I've heard.
Well, that, in all honesty, sounds like a bunch of malarkey to me. Dude, I don't know about you, but the idea of working 40 hours a week and only getting weekends off sucks.
No, I think it's bullshit. I think it's bullshit. Yeah, I agree with you. I've heard that point.
Well, and I've heard it too, but I want you to think about this. When people are off on the weekends, are they stealing? Are they committing crimes? Or well, no, they're relaxing. So
yeah, I think my friends and family, exactly.
And what I think is more likely to happen is that we'll probably shift to something like a 3 to 4 day work week, and then we'll have 3 or 4 days off. And that will end up being able to sustain a household. It might even get to a point to where, because there's so much economic surplus, because there's such a high GDP, that everybody is able to live based on a single income household. And that, I think, is the real goal here, is to make it to where one half of the population, whether that be men or women who are staying at home, are not being taxed, where they're actually able to raise their own children, for God's sake, and not hand them over to the state in public or government schools.
Awesome. Thank you. Can't agree more.
Yes, ma'am. All right. So we're going to go to Tice, then Blue, and then we're going to close it out.
Hello?
I guess that TYCE, I guess that's Tice, but if Tice isn't speaking up, then Blue, go ahead.
All right, I'll go. I wanted to get your any information from you on, someone who is, pursuing the path of shamanism. I am growing very rapidly in this ever since I had a calling about a year ago. But it sounds like it's important to have more people who are interested in it, and it's important for a lot of these things that we want. What we're talking about, like sort of like a utopian or like more abundance, what I'm trying to say, in our world. We need that. We need shamanism on our side. So that's my question.
Well, the shamanic path is not for everyone, but anyone, for the most part, can become
That's Reddit, folks.
or practice shamanism.
That's the Reddit, folks. Anyway,
it's
enjoy,
not
guys.
easy. It's actually very difficult, and it's kind of like buds in special forces training. You weed yourself out eventually, and it's going to require a lot of personal sacrifice. I will also say that when going down that path and you start to experience things in the paranormal realm or in the spirit world, anything that is going to, like, if you're ever getting the message to harm yourself or another person, then it is not of God, it is not of the good, and you should ignore it completely. I'd also say that there's varying levels of shamanism. There's varying different aspects to it. So there's shamans that are like healers that specialize in healing. There are shamans that specialize in, like, say, for example, having visions and premonitions. There are shamans that specialize in being like a storyteller and a historian. There's shamans that specialize
I'm not good enough guy.
Plant
I don't know how to be
medicines
nice
and stuff like that.
Good night.
So
see how we're living.
In what I've ventured to do is try to be all of those things simultaneously, but each of those
people on
things
Reddit,
is its own rabbit hole.
Brainwashed they are, right?
And each of those things requires different
this is how they censor it, so
different
people don't
knowledge
get the truth
bases.
on Reddit, right? You can tell.
So you can
on
have
Twitter,
a kind of all-encompassing form of shamanism, and that's essentially what I try to go for.
I just wanted to prove to you guys how it
but
works.
I would say find your niche, find your niche, know what is going to work best for you, and do that into the ground. Do it as much as you can, get as proficient and as high functioning in that aspect as you can. And don't compare yourself to others. Like they say, comparison is the thief of joy. So know that as long as you are comparing yourself to the way that you were before, and if you are better than you were the day before, then you're making progress and you're evolving. That's a good thing. I would also say that at some point you may end up getting the message to pray more, or to learn a shamanic song or a certain shamanic tradition that may appeal to your ancestral roots. That is probably a good idea. I would say get in touch with your roots, get in touch with your ancestral lineage, figure out who they were, figure out where they came from, and also maybe even go as far as to try to eat a diet that is as close to your ancestral roots as possible, because that might help you raise the frequency of your consciousness. I would also say stay away from things like genetically modified organisms and pesticides. Stay away from preservatives, artificial ingredients, artificial sweeteners. Try to drink alkaline water and clean water that's free of fluoridation and chlorine and lead and all that stuff. I would also say that spending time in nature is very important. That nature has the answers. The question is who's willing to seek those answers and do so in a way that they are both vulnerable and also strengthened at the same time.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're gonna.
Can I get a quick question in for Ashton, real quick?
Oh, we got one more question.
Ashton, have you seen the new stuff about? I guess there's Chinese courts are hearing cases about the MH370 stuff. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so just I guess some closing thought on that. I did see that there's a few families that are still fighting back. Most of them have basically been forced into silence through settlement agreements where they can no longer speak back for much less money than most people would think. About $80,000 total is all they've ever gotten. $50,000 and like $30,000 settlements because they were tried in Malaysia and in China as opposed to the United States. It's very weird why these weren't tried in the United States, especially for the American passenger and family. Thomas Wood is the brother of Philip Wood, who was on board the plane. And this was dismissed, this case in the United States in 2018 by Ketanji Brown Jackson, who is now a Supreme Court justice. Just throwing that out there. I've reached out to those lawyers because if these videos are real, if MH370 implicates the U.S. government, it means that these cases should have been tried in the United States where these people got a lot more money. I would like those families to see the evidence. I don't have any direct contacts or ways to get a hold of them, but the way that I would go about it is through the lawyers because I don't want to contact the families directly. But if anybody has connections to them, please show them the evidence because it can change the circumstances of those court cases, and it might be a way where we can get disclosure as well.
Cool.
Very cool.
All right, so final thoughts. I will give it to Ashton and Red Panda before I conclude. If you guys have anything further you would like to say, please do so.
I think that's probably about it. It's been a great 3-hour space here, going through great questions, evidence, going through the history of UFOlogy. I just want to once again appreciate Jake, ex-Shaman, here for hosting this space, having us on. I think we had a great crossover here and some of this stuff. Happy to talk to you anytime you want, man. Big supporter of you, your personality, and everything. And I want to thank everybody who's been listening and following along as well. Appreciate you guys all.
Great. And I'm happy to be here. Great to meet you, Jake. I'm serious about that editing. Hit me up in the DM. Ashton, I'm so proud of you. Proud of Tupa, too. Love a bunch of you guys in here. That was great to be here.
Well, thank you both. And Ashton, I couldn't help but when you said ex-Shaman, I understand what you meant by like Twitter X, but it also almost kind of sounds like I'm an ex-Shaman, like EX-Shaman. So I'm thinking that, I don't call myself a shaman. I say a shamanic practitioner. I practice shamanism. But if you had to throw a term in front of shaman, I would just say I'm America's shaman. And that's kind of the vibe that I go for. I'm all people shaman here in America. One of the things that the shaman does is, they dress in elaborate fashion that is shocking to the cognitive system. But once they've delivered that cognitive shock, then they lend
I'm gonna go get some
to
food
the
after this, so we're
people or
gonna
the
be shutting down
tribe
the space
the
here.
truth that
Or
they are
the stream.
observing reality through a subjective
I don't think I'm gonna
cultural
be back
lens,
later. Hard to
and
say.
that the way that they're living is based
Probably
within
gonna
a
take the day
social
off today.
construct that has nothing to
I need some
do with
sleep.
actual objective reality. And in many ways, that's essentially what I'm doing as we speak, as I am trying to help people to understand the corrupt system and the spirit world and how it is that we can transform it and get to a more objective view and unify and have a united collective consciousness. So I'm doing everything I can as a shamanic practitioner to fill the shoes of my ancestors and of all the previous shaman that came before me. That being said, you guys, this has been absolutely marvelous. And
love you
to
guys.
speak with somebody like yourself, Ashton, that has some real knowledge on this, and to find that our knowledge is actually correlating very much. They are in tandem with each other, that we are both actually pretty much following the same trail and coming to the same conclusions, is indicative that we are both on the right track and we are both moving the ball down the field. It behooves me to believe that at this point, would the UAP Disclosure Act even be on the floor were it not for the kind of work that you are doing, that I am attempting to do, that Dr. Stephen Greer is doing, or that people like Red Panda or Tupac or any of the people that are in this room? Would we be able to see this on the floor of the Congress were it not for us? This is what I'm saying about us controlling the narrative. Now they have to respond to us. We don't have to respond to them. It's them responding to us that changes the dialogue. It's them that's responding to us that puts the power back in our hand. Thomas Jefferson once said that when the people are afraid of their government, there is tyranny. But when the government is afraid of their people, there is liberty. And not fearful in a way of fearing attack, but fearful in a way of respect for the fact that we are the power that they seek to control. It is our minds and our paradigm and our dollar that they seek to control.
People are starting to spread it now.
And when we take back our sovereignty, when we take back our liberty, when we take back our very minds out of the hands of these social engineers that seek to turn us into some mind-numbed robot, some half-baked moron consuming all this trash, then we really begin to ascend on more than one level. So with that said, you guys, let's do something like this again. As new information comes out, Ash, you know, if you want to do something like this again, I'm all for it. This has been a fantastic space. Ladies and gentlemen in the space, please tune in to my space with Charles Rixey on Friday. That space, let me just make sure I know the time that it's going to be starting. I don't want to give you bad information here. It is going to be starting at 2 p.m.
This has been awesome.
On Friday to 2 p.m. Arizona time. That's 4 p.m. on the East Coast. That's 3 p.m. in Central Time, and that's 1 p.m. on the West Coast. So tune into that. Also, I'm going to be doing a space with Alpha Warrior here soon. I don't know if he's still in the chat here, but he has quite the story that needs to be heard, you guys. The stuff this man has been through for doing nothing wrong, to be perfectly honest with you, is absolutely atrocious. And he deserves to have a platform where we have as many people listening to his story and sharing it as possible. So tune into those. We're going to try to do the one with Alpha Warrior on Saturday. I have yet to make the space. We're still kind of arranging things. Definitely tune in the one for on Friday.
I see go up to the chat, the thing here.
Go up to the nest. Click through here while we're wrapping up. If you see something, please retweet it. Because we are changing the dialogue and we are changing the world one mind at a time.
Best account on Twitter.
Because we are changing the dialogue and...
There we go. That's the end. Wow, that was sweet, guys. That was astonishing. That was awesome, guys. That was astonishing. 4 orbs. Jake, the America Shaman, guys. You heard it there. America Shaman, right? Legit. What a nice guy, man. What a nice guy he is. Wow. He's a nicer guy than me by far. I'm way more of an asshole than he is. He's a nice dude. Yeah, it just really reinforces the idea that he kind of got screwed over when it comes to the justice system. Hard to believe that anybody like that could ever hurt anybody else. Seems like one of the nicest people I've ever run across my whole life. This is a good one here. But yeah, anyway, guys, make sure you check out America Shaman. I would definitely do more spaces with him, listen to more of his stuff. Just seems like a very guy who's pretty enlightened about especially the UFO community for sure. Knows a lot about the history of UFOlogy. While I don't agree with everything he said, I think I agree with quite a lot that he said. Sponge of data. He went hard on a lot of that stuff, way harder than I thought. He messaged me this list ahead of time, and I didn't realize he was just going to be going that hard on all that. That was awesome. So big props to Jake. Thanks to chat for being out here. I'm going to go ahead and get some food. You guys have a wonderful evening. We'll pick it up tomorrow. Probably go back into our evidence and all the stuff that we've been sitting out here for several days now that we've got. I still haven't recorded catastrophic disclosure yet, but that's going to be our new terminology, catastrophic disclosure, guys. That's the message we're pushing out there, right? Yeah, and I like to speak to diverse people as well. You know, I don't think you should always speak to just people you agree with, right? I think you should speak to people you don't agree with as well. So you guys have a wonderful evening, and we will talk soon. Later, folks. Peace.